Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Passengers crowded at the entrance, not realizing that the crowd they created only made things more difficult. The desire of some particularly intense citizens to shove their luggage over the heads of less energetic passengers also added to the difficulty. Benjamin watched all this commotion from the driver's cabin for about 5 minutes. But then he decided it was time to take drastic measures. He bellowed. And so the ranks of the stormers and his vehicle shook. People, move away from the door to a safe distance. Otherwise, the bus is not going anywhere today. After blocking the first step, the grandmother screamed how it wouldn't go. I have to go home now. Everyone started shouting that they had to go home. Benjamin barked at the citizens. If you don't calm down, I will have to call the police. The bus driver's appeal had an effect and the crowd quieted down a bit. The door of the old bus closed with a chant, and the ordinary citizens who remained outside began to hammer on it with their fists. The driver picked up his cell phone and dialed the control room. Hi, have Wendy come over, or whoever the other available controllers are. My village stormed again, and it's the same thing every time. You ask them, and they don't understand. Not a minute later, Wendy showed up on platform 4. She had worked in passenger transportation for many years and knew the ins and outs of her profession. She from afar cheerfully shouted part the honest people and prepare the travel documents. The mass of people stirred. Someone asked unhappily, "What if the box office is out of tickets? I have to go home." The checker nodded in the direction where the private citizens were waiting. In that case, you should take a cab. And those who have tickets, I ask you to quickly line up one by one. We enter quietly and immediately move into the cabin. Older children are the first to be let in. The crowd has taken the form of a line. The shouting and distracting jokes stopped too. Benjamin was enjoying the spectacle of the organized boarding of passengers when the controllers checked the last ticket. He praised the assistant Wendy. You have a rare talent. You shouldn't be running around the buses as a checker, but performing in the circus arena. The compliment pleased the lonely woman, and she winked coquettishly at Benjamin. Why do I need unnecessary popularity? I never dreamed of fame. But a man like you, Ben, I wouldn't mind grabbing. Just no luck in a girl's love life. Oh, Wendy, don't be pompous. I hear you've got a lot of suitors. There's a lot of suitors out there. They don't do you any good. You, Ben, you're a different story. I'm sorry I'm late. A disgruntled old lady who'd distinguished herself at boarding decided to intervene in this cross-exchange of pleasantries. They were in a hurry, and now they can't talk enough. You'd better get on the other bus, Wendy. The driver there is looking for his happiness and can't find it. Benjamin is a family man. He has a family. He has no time to think about fun. The speech got the audience going again, and a distressed Wendy jumped off the step of the bus. Have a good trip. Benjamin waved his hand. Thank you, Wendy. The doors closed with a distinctive hiss. The driver turned around and said cheerfully to the passengers, "Well, friends, let's go." Benjamin loved his job, and he loved the passengers, who every day opened something new for him. For almost 2 decades, the man sat behind the wheel in the mornings and drove people around the surrounding villages and hamlets. And over the years, he had learned the psychology of passengers. He was always able to spot a potential intruder in the crowd by eye. Today, there was no particularly dangerous contingent, except for Grandma Lucy. But Benjamin knew this old woman well because he had done her a favor several times for a fee. Generally speaking, they didn't pay a lot of favors for false trips at their company. But the park director turned a blind eye to the deeds of some drivers. Benjamin, too, was allowed to commit such an offense only because he had a large family. He himself often spoke in the company of the men on my payroll, 4 youngsters, and a beloved wife. A habit of reminding me of my special purpose led to his being nicknamed Good Father. The nickname stuck so firmly to Benjamin that even the boss once blurted it out without thinking. When a reporter came to the car park to write a story about the best driver of the company, it is you need to coordinate the portrait of our father. Well done. He's our drummer, so to speak, the front runner of production. The journalist did not understand what he was talking about and frowned, but he was not confused by the confusion of the guy with the camera, and he continued in the same vein. Although we only employ selected personnel, but Benjamin is the backbone. You could say the backbone of our enterprise of reporters. Everyone blinks their eyes in the same confused manner. Why do you call this person so strangely? The reason for the correspondent's misunderstanding reached the director, and he laughed juicily about the hero of your future essay. Or what are you going to write about him? 4 kids, and today not every family can afford such a child. Any science will feed everyone, and money any reporter is timid enough to put in. But the state helps such families. The director of the motor pool looked condescendingly at the guy. Young man, how can you support such a family on one allowance? A man has to work so hard that sparks fly from him in all directions. Our Benjamin is a man with a backbone. That's what you say about him. I insist on this characterization. Prepared by the director of the reporter long and winded questions Benjamin men. For 2 hours he sweated with tension and could not wait for the end of the interview, which was more like interrogation with passion. When the torture was over, he headed for the director's office. David's new ones were friends of mine. Are there no worthy people in our fleet except me? The chief looked at his subordinate with a smile. Imagine, Ben, there are none. Everyone has a sin, even a small one, but there is one. And you could say, are a crystal man. You don't drink, you don't smoke, and you don't even go out with girls. Unicum. Any man likes to hear praise from his superiors. Benjamin also softened his tone a bit, so you decided to be my friend. But this is the last time. I'm not gonna take the fall for everyone else. I'd rather take an extra flight than answer a reporter's stupid questions. All right, Ben, take it easy. You're doing your job. That kid did his. You'll get a bonus for moral damages. I've already signed the order. Benjamin was shining like a cleaned-up nickel. That's different. For a nice bonus, you can be a little patient. It happened 2 years ago, just before a professional holiday. The newspaper published a big article about the work of a bus driver. The material was placed on the front page along with a large photo of Benjamin. Probably for a whole month, the men congratulated Benjamin, and the whole family was proud of his successes. One day, Mike flew in from school and from the doorstep yelled, "Dad, I got an A+ for you." He and his wife were first shocked by such a statement, but later realized that the son received an excellent mark for an essay on the work achievements of his father. In a word, the hero's fate turned out to be pleasant, but it was pleasant twice as well, because the boss kept his word. And Benjamin received a bonus of 1 salary for the holiday. Such a significant financial increase helped a lot, because the family was always lacking something. In addition to the award, Benjamin was presented with a certificate of merit, which his eldest daughter Adriana put on the wall in the living room. No sooner had the festive fanfare played than David invited the best employee to his office. The chief started the conversation from afar. "Ben, I can't even imagine. What's it like to raise 4 kids? As far as I know, your wife doesn't work." Benjamin did not like to bring his family problems to the public and briefly remarked, "Today, everyone has a hard time. That's why the number of children in a family doesn't matter much, and I'm not used to complaining. My wife and I decided right away that we will have many children. After all, I myself and my wife grew up in a large family." The boss scrutinized the driver's face, as if he didn't dare to move on to the main topic of conversation. "I was alone at my parents', and we have a spouse, and only an only son. And she wanted a daughter so badly. But with the second child we kept postponing, time flew. A man mistakenly thinks he has his whole life ahead of him. And then he finds himself at the finish line, when it's too late to change anything." Benjamin listened to the director's strange speech and tried to guess what all this verbal entourage was about. David, in passing, also remembered his turbulent youth and his dream to create a universal car because he had a dusty engineering diploma in his desk drawer. And only after all these pleasant memories he voiced the main purpose of the conversation. "Benjamin, I thought long and hard before calling you to this conversation. But I don't mind people having the opportunity to earn extra money, as long as it doesn't hurt the cause. On the contrary, I'm even willing to help with that. I've been looking at you for a long time, and I can see that you're a person I can trust." Benjamin decided to help the boss. "David, if you want to offer me a special task, I will gladly fulfill it." The chief exhaled with relief. "Thank you for understanding me correctly. Yes, the task is specific, and I can entrust it only to a reliable person in whom I am 100% sure. It's not a big deal. Just deliver the shipment to the address I give you and get paid. The only thing you'll have to do is keep your mouth shut. So there has to be complete confidentiality." "David, I hear you. You can rely on me completely." "Very good. I promise you'll be well rewarded for a small favor." The day after this conversation, Benjamin loaded 2 large boxes on his bus. He did not ask the supervisor about what was in these cardboard boxes. He took the boxes to a village that was not far from the endpoint of his daily route. Hook in 10 kilometers took a little time, but in his pocket crunched $50. The amount of the reward made the man very happy, and he fought for such a fancy tip. "I'm ready to make left-handed flights every day." But the chief didn't ask Benjamin for favors that often. Sometimes a couple times a week, and there were times when a whole month's special delivery wasn't needed. Benjamin asked no questions and waited patiently for the next order. It suited both parties. The man did not try to memorize those who came for boxes or bags, nor was he interested in the contents of the cargoes he carried. Today too, even before the line, the boss came to the garage. "Benjamin, can I talk to you for a minute?" Benjamin went out, knowing in advance what the director would ask him to do. David, as usual, looked around to observe the rules of secrecy. He was clearly agitated about something, but Benjamin paid no attention to this fact. A man in a director's position could be in trouble. The chief said in a low voice, "We'll have to deliver something tomorrow for sure." Benjamin pulled his eyes out. "But David, that's such a detour of over 100 kilometers. My bus is running on fumes as it is." The warden interrupted him to take my horror. "You'll have to leave late at night, but I'll ship you myself and give you all the waybills." Benjamin was surprised again, because he had shipped goods without accompanying documentation before. "David, and I can know what the goods are. Although I am not overly curious, I would like to know just in case." The chief grinned wryly. "It's nothing special. It's just iron. You get the money there on the spot and take the car to the garage. Can you take the next day off?" "Martin, I've already warned your shift manager. Benjamin has already forgotten when he vacationed with his family. Therefore, the possibility of getting an unscheduled day off made him very happy. The man was already anticipating how he and his family would go to the nature, and he and Mike would go fishing. And his wife and daughter would then cook a fabulously tasty soup on the fire. The driver's fantasies were so realistic that he even felt in his mouth the taste of this dish. But the granny in the front seat interrupted. "Ben, where are you going? I was supposed to get thrown off at the turnoff, and now I have to walk back almost a kilometer." The man who reproached the old woman for unfair trade cheerfully noted 1 kilometer. "It's an easy warm-up for you. Don't play helpless. I remember last year you stole corn from a farmer's field. I saw it with my own eyes. You carried a full sack so vigorously that even I, a man, envied your strength." The passengers became animated and began to remember the little and big sins of Baba Lucy. Benjamin turned around and drove to the turn from which there was a path to the other side of the village. An elderly woman picked up her bag and empty bucket and expressed her gratitude to the driver. "Thank you, Ben. Otherwise, I would have had to stomp back the other way. Old age is no fun, and my legs hurt." You, Grandma, didn't have time to list your ailments because the bus erupted in singing. stopped. Lucy abruptly jumped from the step to the ground and started down the path like a seasoned sprinter. "Grandma's giving it to me." I'm always amazed at the stamina of the older generation. My grandmother, too, sometimes does such a number that you can't believe it. The bus went further along the route. Passengers eagerly praised the old people for a long time, and the remaining passengers also began to tell about the exploits of their grandfathers and grandmothers. Benjamin wanted to turn on the record player, but changed her mind because live stories of villagers are much more interesting than any music. Despite the many years of married life, Benjamin felt a thrill every time he returned home. In the family circle, he forgot about fatigue, work troubles, and the sweet chatter of the children energized him with such positivity that he was ready to move mountains. As was his habit, he opened the apartment door cautiously that evening, hoping to enter the house silently. But the youngest Benjamin shouted with one voice, "Daddy's here." The boys hung on their father's arms and, interrupting each other, began to recount their day's adventures. Jack, as the eldest, reported their misbehavior to Benjamin. "Papa, you don't know what Ben did today, do you? He made everyone eat soap." The 6-year-old pounced on his brother. "Don't lie. I didn't make them. They wanted to blow their own bubbles." The boy was ready to burst, but Molly was clearly interrupting his youngest son's demonstration. "It's a cliché from both of them. Daddy's tired at work, and you're upsetting him with your nonsense." The boys left, but their screams a second later were heard from the nursery. Mike tried to calm the brothers down. "If you don't calm down, I'll hang you on the balcony instead of bath brooms. I have a math problem, and you're yelling at the top of your lungs. Why don't you do some cleaning? There's toys all over the place." The criticism had an effect on the twins, and they quieted down. But Benjamin was intrigued by the incident that happened at the daycare center. "Molly, what's the soap story with our Irishman?" Ben was on a roll. They were supposed to have a bubble party, but the teacher handed out bubbles only to the most obedient kids because there weren't enough for everyone. Then our son decided to restore justice and held a quick masterclass on how to get soap balls. In the simplest way possible, he demonstrated by example how to properly eat a bar of soap to then blow bubbles out of his mouth. But something went wrong. It was good that not all the children had time to use the advice, but the effect began earlier than planned. And even before going out for a walk, all the groups were filled with bubbles. The kids were delighted, but the educators saw in the act of our son premeditated malice. "If I understand correctly, I am called to the daycare center." The woman looked faithfully into her husband's eyes. "I've already denied it. I promised that you will seriously talk to your son, and you will fulfill your parental mission. But after dinner. In fact, I think it was the caretaker's own oversight. How could they not notice that the whole group went to my free room at the same time?" Benjamin remembered his own childhood pranks. His parents, too, had often had to take responsibility for their son's pranks at school. But his father had used a belt instead of words to persuade them. It was an old-fashioned remedy that worked without fail. Benjamin had also grabbed the belt more than once when the younger children made him mad. But his wife was categorically against physical methods of punishing children. "Ben, realize that this shows your weakness, and then any punishment can adversely affect the child's psyche. Molly, but if nothing is done, our twins will soon walk on their heads." Indeed, the youngest members of the family were constantly having problems. The older children never gave them any trouble. On the contrary, they were always set as an example to others at school. Adriana graduated from school with an excellent certificate and entered university without any problems. Mike was also in good standing and was fond of computer technology. The couple did not plan to add to their family. When Molly became pregnant for the 3rd time, her husband took the news with joy. "It's a gift from God. Molly, God does not give children to everyone, so we should accept this gift with gratitude." I myself was the 5th child in the family and never felt disadvantaged in any way. Molly was obviously raised in a family full of kids too. Only she was the oldest, and she had to help her mother. For that reason, She had to give up her college education. Molly learned to be a pastry chef, but worked in her specialty for only a few years until the birth of her first child. Then Mike was born, and the woman was going to find a job, but her husband kept discouraging her, and I am able to feed the family. So it's your job to provide a home. And Molly spent all day doing housework. But throughout her life, she never regretted devoting herself to her family. She always remembered her mother's words, the highest purpose, women, children. So you should be happy that everything is fine at home. The arrival of twins in the family further strengthened the family and Molly. He valued peace and quiet in his home more than anything else. Everything would have been fine, but lately the financial issue in the family had escalated quite a bit. After dinner, she decided to talk about it with her husband. When the children scattered to their rooms, woman cautiously asked Ben, "Maybe I should get a job after all." A dark shadow immediately ran across the man's face. "Molly, are you doing it again? I thought we already agreed that you'd be the rear guard. My concern is making money. You can see I'm trying to put every penny I can into the house." "Ben, but you can't work your whole life like a damn man. You'll get yourself into trouble. And I want to spend my old age with you. And then the twins are going to school this year, which means we're gonna have more expenses. And I'm aware of the changes that are coming. I got a new job from the principal. I'm gonna make an extra $30, which is a modest amount of money, but it's a steady income. Ben, but you have no idea how much prices are going up. It's scary to go to the store. I was offered a part-time job close to home and only had 2 days to think about it. Because there's a lot of applicants. What kind of job?" Molly noticed her husband had cooled down a bit and continued, "Of course, the position is not prestigious, but at any time I can run home." The man sighed. "Molly, spill already fully. What kind of work did you find as a cleaner in a beauty salon?" "It's nothing complicated. Just a couple of times a day to clean and take out the trash. It's not very good pay either. At least it's something." The man thought about it, weighing the pros and cons of such a decision. But since the pros clearly outweighed the cons, he said, "Okay, I won't stop you. If you have the desire, work. If you don't like it, you can quit at any time." Molly was pleased with her husband's consent and in gratitude gently entered his neck with her hands. "Thank you, dear. At least I will have the opportunity to change my life a little. And then sit days at home in 4 walls. Sometimes it's so depressing." Benjamin was struck by his wife's revelation. It had never occurred to him before that being a housewife would make his Molly uncomfortable. But while discussing his wife's employment, he had forgotten to warn her about tomorrow's trip. He didn't remember until bedtime. "Molly, I forgot to tell you that I'll be back very late tomorrow. It is even possible that I will be free closer to morning." The woman frowned. "The chief's special assignment again." "Well, yes, except you didn't spread that around, Ben. You're a strange man. Who can I tell if I don't leave the house for days on end? I warned you just in case the conversation got out there, and you didn't think twice about me traveling. You think anyone's interested. Everybody's got their own business today, and nobody cares about you. All I'm asking you to do is be careful. I don't like your secret flights. It's not a good feeling in my heart." Benjamin himself was feeling uneasy, but he did not tell his wife about it. All night he had nightmares involving Grandma Lucy, but he attributed the bad dreams to chronic fatigue. In the morning, the man felt his usual vigor again and began to leisurely get ready for work. Molly also got up early to prepare breakfast for her husband and pack the brakes for the road. The husband watched her lovingly. Molly had enough of a couple sandwiches and tea. "You always pack me such a hearty ration, as if I were going away for a week. Anything can happen on the road, and an extra stash doesn't hurt your pocket. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you I'm getting an extra day off for today's trip, so we could totally go out tomorrow. I'd love to go fishing, and the boys would love it." Jack and Benjamin caught on to their father's words and shouted, "Yay, we're going fishing tomorrow." Molly calmed down a little. Benjamin kissed his wife and the boys and went to work. All day, he thought about his upcoming vacation with his family and couldn't wait for his shift to end. By evening, Benjamin felt extremely tired again. He wanted to go home, but a special assignment of the chief was waiting ahead. The man drove his bus into the garage and headed for the warehouses where the loading was to take place. He wasn't late, though. David was already on the spot, and his nervous movement and broken voice gave away his excitement. And that was not typical of a supervisor. The behavior made Benjamin a little tense. Benjamin did not ask the chief unnecessary questions and began to load the prepared boxes into the car. "Dan, it's a heavy load today." Something David grinned unkindly. "You'll know a lot and get old quickly, and a lot of information. Sometimes it's dangerous to your health. You better hurry up because you can't be late." The recipient doesn't like to wait. When all the boxes were in the car, David handed Benjamin files with documents, invoices for the goods, but even to the customer only after receiving the money. The amount is stated there at the end. If he refuses to pay, return with the shipment. You remembered everything. The chief's excitement was transferred to Benjamin. "David, is there something you're not telling me? Or am I just imagining it?" The director tried to be cheerful and even smiled, but it was unnatural. He must have switched to an official format of communication because of his excitement. "Benjamin, I don't understand you. First you agreed, and now you have doubts. Is your job to deliver the goods? No more distractions." Although the driver did not like the sudden outburst of the chief, he only shrugged his shoulders. "Yes, to me, that I am a performer, I will do exactly as you said." He did not enter into an argument with the director also because he was afraid of losing additional income and an extraordinary day off. The engine roared and the Jeep tore off, following the car. "How do you transfer the cargo?" They called right away. "Good, David." Benjamin really wanted to finish with the chief's assignment quickly, so he squeezed 100 kilometers per hour out of the wrecked car. According to his conservative calculations, the drive back and forth should take no more than 4 hours. It was all down to handing over the cargo. Benjamin didn't like the specific algorithm the director insisted on. What kind of goods had the chief loaded on board, and why was he so worried about them? The thought wouldn't leave his mind. In order to clarify the situation a little, Benjamin decided to look through the delivery notes, but the documents showed the product with a long number in the quantity of 4,002,011, and no more specifics. He really wanted to stop the car and look into at least one box. But after thinking about it, the man gave up this intention. It would only waste time. It would be faster to get rid of this mysterious cargo and return home. And in general, for the future, it is necessary to preview that in the car can be with unknown goods, and under the article for 2 years, this reasonable thought never once came to mind. And Benjamin regretted that he had been so careless about the chief's assignments before. He arrived at his destination a few minutes before the agreed time, but no one met him. So he had to honk his horn 3 times. But no one showed up after that, and Benjamin muttered to himself, like in a spy movie, "If the goods are legitimate, why all the conspiracy?" The man was about to sound the horn. But first one, then a second shadow flashed ahead. Then a hoarse male voice sounded very close by. "What are you waiting for? Drivers, get out of the car. We're talking." Benjamin opened the door of the Jeep. "Men, what's the big fuss? Give me the money. Take the goods. My orders are to deliver the goods to the location. The rest is none of my business." The same unpleasant voice came closer and took on threatening tones. "Driver, cut the crap. Do as you're told if you don't want to get in trouble." Benjamin got out of the car, but left the door open. The owner of the unpleasant timber grabbed his arm, where the money and the invoice were. Benjamin tried to throw off the living vice. "Man, what's the matter with you? It is you who must first give me the money for the goods, and then I will hand you the documents." That's what David said. Don't give us the time of day. Last time the goods went to an unknown destination, but Igorek got the money for them. He promised to return the full amount today with the next shipment, Benjamin felt that things were beginning to take a bad turn for him. It is known that in a critical situation the brain works more intensively. The man suddenly realized that he had better get away from this place. He jumped into the car and pressed the gas. But the other man, who hadn't said a word before, managed to slip his foot in when Benjamin wanted to slam the car door shut. "Look, Bubbles, what a quick little fella you got. I gotta get his tape. I guess we'll have to beat him out of his money the old-fashioned way." Benjamin carelessly leaned forward to release the door, but the next moment something heavy fell on his head and he blacked out. He was lying in the middle of a meadow high in the sky with the sun pouring down mercilessly on him. Benjamin tried to hide his head in the grass, but it did not help to escape the heat. Suddenly, he saw Molly's face right above his head. His wife was anxious and whispered something to him, but Benjamin could not make out her words. He asked her to speak louder, but she still only moved her lips. Suddenly, Molly's face disappeared, but her voice came out clearly. "Ben, save yourself. You're in danger." The words crashed into his consciousness, and he snapped out of existence. Benjamin could not tell how long he had been unconscious, but when he opened his eyes with difficulty, he was dazzled by the bright light that was streaming through the cracks of the wooden structure. He was inside by the peculiarities of the structure's design. The man realized that it was an ordinary rustic barn. He would have tried to change his body position, but nausea immediately came to his throat. Benjamin shouted loudly, "Somebody help." No one answered his call, and only the birds chirped merrily or chirped behind the wall of the structure. Benjamin took a breath, and again he shouted, and again his call went unanswered. His head ached unbearably. Arms and legs were bound with layers of duct tape. Men, by an incredible effort, moved his body closer to the large beam of sunlight. He only had time to think that there was a life-saving escape to freedom, and he sank back into unconsciousness. He was brought to his senses by a stream of icy water. It's rough action. Someone upstairs was using unconventional language. "Come on, asshole, wake up. You're not a guest." Benjamin opened his eyes and saw in front of him a man he had never met before. This type of unpleasant appearance was satisfied with the result of the ice shower. "But you're awake. Come on, get up, they're waiting for you." He realized it was better to obey the bandit's order. The man who had brought him to his senses only untied his legs, but helped Benjamin up more peacefully. He said, "I don't have time to make ceremonies with you, moving in buns." He doesn't like to wait. Benjamin only dared to ask how far to go. "I don't feel well. You mourn. Be glad you're alive. You might even say you're fabulously lucky, because knuckles bury inveterate debtors alive in the ground." The unkempt man was holding Benjamin's hand, but the fulfillment of his direct duty did not prevent him from giving advice. "You'd better keep your head down. Listen to what the fire says and agree. Is that the only way you have a chance of staying alive? The boss doesn't like it when he's not cooperative." They walked another 200 meters with confusing paths, and the man nodded in the direction of the house. "It's Kevin's hut, but it's kind of a staging area. That's how he likes the good life," and remembered only by the desperate tone of the attendant. Benjamin realizes he's not doing particularly well with the female sex, so he was jealous of his boss. A night dream or a delusion came to mind, and the thought flashed through my mind that I should have warned them. At a glance, Benjamin realized that the head of the gang was a common racketeer. Despite the fact that that wonderful era, when such groups ruled the ball, has faded into oblivion, its hairs remain and continue to live by the old rules. Served him. An elderly woman of stout build spoke of a tendency to gluttony. As the convoyers pushed Benjamin into the room, the master cast a careless and glancing glance at the driver. "We'll break for the night or look for consensus." To me, the advice of the escort, Benjamin replied, "Look for it." "Well done, man. Good thinking. Why climb into the bottle through the narrow neck when you can negotiate? Anyway, here's the deal. We got the goods and the invoices too. We're good with this shipment. All that's left is for us to pay back our past debts. Can you pay by card or cash? Whichever you prefer. Castet laughed, satisfied with his good joke. Benjamin tried to speak calmly, honorable. There's been a mistake with me. I'm just a regular bus driver. The chief just asked me to do him a small favor, so I have absolutely no idea about debts and other small things. Castet wiped his greasy hands with a towel and expressively rolled wheat on the table. Listen, fly-ins, I don't give a shit who sent you and why I need money. Call your stooge. Tell him you're in deep shit. Let him return the favor, and we'll let you go right away. The bandit held out Benjamin's cell phone. The headache was getting worse, and to this sign of indisposition, there was an even stronger trembling, which the man could not control. He dialed the number of the fleet manager for a long time, but he answered only after the sixth dial tone, and immediately started shouting at his employee. Benjamin, where are you? You and me. As agreed. You should have called me last night. You realize you've let me down. Benjamin's eyes darkened, and he shouted into the phone. You're the one who set me up, David. I'm being charged a debt by strangers. Deal with them. I have a family, children. I have nothing at all to do with your murky too. Benjamin could hear the chief puffing into the phone. He wanted to tell him that it was mean of him to set his men up. But Knuckles whipped out his cell phone. Listen, David, if you don't give me my grandmother's back within 24 hours, I'll have your driver on thin straps. But I'm not gonna stop there. I'm gonna get my hands on you too. You know I can keep my word. So you're gonna have to draw your own conclusions. The gang leader disconnected the phone and looked regretfully at Benjamin. That's cool. You're fucked up, man. Looks like you're gonna have to pay your boss back. Think of a way to make it quicker. You said you got a wife and kids. Benjamin felt a chill go through him. Please don't hurt my family. I can work off the debt if it suits you. The committee laughed again, but it made him feel even sadder. You can't work off such grandmothers in your whole life. Shall I disassemble you for organs? Do what you want with me, but just leave my loved ones alone. I beg you. Castet looked at Benjamin with an attentive gaze. I'll think about it. You can relax for now. Glisty will take him to the barn. Make sure he doesn't run away. He's your head. A familiar man escorted Benjamin to the wooden structure. He was fidgeting. He spoke in a distinctly rural dialect. Let me get you something to eat. Don't expect much, because I'll have to give you a piece of my rations. Benjamin sank to the floor, where fresh hay lay thickly on the floor. But the worm wouldn't go away. Don't be mad at me, boy. I got in a jam once too. Knuckles saved me from jail. Now I got to pay my debt. I couldn't get used to it at first. I wanted to run away. Then I got used to it. The warden disappeared for a few minutes. He came back with a bowl of delicious-smelling brew. Nancy gave it to me secretly so I wouldn't see the fire. Good woman, her nephew. The last of the scumbags. Benjamin ate the soup greedily, but did not let it pass his ears. Everything the worm was saying, a stray thought ran through his head, and he looked hopefully at his probation officer. I really need to make a phone call. Just half a minute. You see, my wife and kids are there. They're very worried about me. Glist, eyes bulging. Come on, what if the committee finds out? He'll eat me without salt. He won't find out. I'll take everything quietly. Nothing will be heard. The little man jumped out of the door and soon returned. He handed him a button and a cell phone to ring. Only quickly Benjamin began frantically dialing the number of the fleet director. But the voice answered and informed him that no such number existed. He didn't want to call his wife, but there was no other option left. Hearing his voice, Molly shouted to Ben, "What's wrong with you? Where are you?" As time was limited, and with fear, he watched the street. He whispered Molly in a high-pitched whisper, "Go to the park to see David. He'll tell you all about it." The minder rushed over to him and snatched the phone. "There are rats everywhere. I don't want to get burned for being nice." Benjamin couldn't sleep because his head wouldn't stop hurting in the glass, the motor tape on his legs. His own thoughts did not give rest either. The man could hear a worm walking behind the thin wall of the shed. He tried not to think about what awaited him tomorrow, but to remember the pleasant moments of his family life. Benjamin did not notice how he fell into a restless sleep. Like the previous night, he had nightmares, scary pictures accompanied by loud voices. And then there was a rumble. The man tried to rise to his feet, but with his hands bound, he could not do so immediately. The sound of gunfire came from somewhere very close by. No, it wasn't a dream. It was indeed firing. Benjamin crept cautiously to the locked door outside, hoping the guards would hear him. He asked quietly, "Lovely, what's going on in there?" But there was no sign of the warden's presence. The man tried to open the door, but it would not budge. Then he began to look for another way out, encouraged himself with words. Ben is even more active. It could not be that there was no loophole in the village barn, but the man was unable to complete his inspection of the wooden structure. From the street came voices, "Charlie, you check in the barn, and I'll see what's in the bathhouse." The Knuckles could not have gotten away so quickly. You don't even know what he's capable of. He's like water through a crack. The barn door swung open, and Benjamin was blinded by a powerful spotlight. "There's someone out there. Get him in here." I caught one carp in the bushes too. The next moment, Benjamin had a bag over his head and was dragged towards the exit. Then he was thrown like a log into the back seat of a car. Soon another bale landed beside him. There was not enough air, and the man began to breathe often. Why did the polyethylene stick to the art? Benjamin held his breath and clamped his teeth into the slippery texture. The operation was successful, and a stream of fresh air rushed into the opening, and with it the familiar odor of unwashed bodies mixed with cheap cigarettes hit his nose. "You're the worm." Something mooed from downstairs. Since Benjamin could do nothing to help his minder at the moment, he whispered advice: "Take a deep breath. Then the bag will stick to your face. Try to skip it, polyethylene, not tight, but ordinary, as in the store." There was a quiet fuss on the floor, and Benjamin guessed that the worm was trying to put his advice into practice. The struggle with the film went on for a long time, and finally his triumphant voice was heard. "Bingo. Thanks, kid, for the tip." I almost choked. "Tell me, what was that?" "Our competitors broke into our house. They sent the guys to the afterlife, but I managed to hide. And the brass knuckles. I don't know where it is, but probably an iron. He always gets away with it. I wonder where they're taking us. We gotta conserve our strength. If he sees us talking, we'll be in trouble." The men have fallen silent. The forced position was very uncomfortable, and his mother will never know how ignominiously her son died. "Benjamin," shouted the comrades, "do not panic before the time." The man listened to the conversation outside, trying to understand a word only at the very end. The one who had brought them said to someone in plain English that Frank thinks he's the only one so smart or conspired with him on the price. Charlie unloaded. If the men there didn't bake, the worm didn't hold back. What a bastard! It was he who leaked us. Charlie. And such a servant was before the Knuckles licked his feet. But to finish the indignant monologue, Fair Bandit could not manage, because they again roughly grabbed and dragged out of the car. The bassist said, "Charlie, tell him that I do not need colored papers. Let him pay for the goods in dollars for 10 grand apiece." Soon, the native jeep pulled away. A bag was removed from Benjamin's head. From the bright light, I had to squeeze my eyes shut. But this unpleasant sensation was fully compensated by the impossibility to breathe normally. For a few minutes, the captive enjoyed the fact that he could breathe freely. Someone was breathing noisily beside him, too. Benjamin turned his head and saw the happy face shining. Alive and happy. A man with a gray beard and strange garb was examining them with a sheet of appraising eyes. He shouted something in his own language, and a woman of about the same age approached him with a quick step. Benjamin guessed that it was the wife of the host. Listening to the conversation, he realized that the owner's name was Betty. Her husband explained something to her at length, but she only nodded and smiled. Then the woman called a big guy in the same shirt as the owner and showed him the worms. The latter started at his Tarabarov and forcefully dragged Benjamin's partner deep into the yard. The master pulled out a folding knife, and Benjamin involuntarily shuddered. The man looked at him understandingly and grinned, saying something in his own language. With a single movement, Frank cut the bonds on his captive's arms. 2 days of captivity had left bloody wounds under the tape. The pain was so unbearable that tears rolled down Benjamin's eyes. Frank studied the slaves' faces for a while, and then he spoke in his own dialect. Without ceasing to speak, he led Benjamin toward a structure resembling a mubarak. The captive guessed that this was now his new abode. There was only one small window in the long room, so the newcomer did not immediately see the interior of the dwelling and the people with whom he would have to share his unenviable fate. The newcomers were also interested, and people began to approach him from different directions. What struck Benjamin most of all was the emptiness. In the eyes of the hut's inhabitants, he asked loudly, "Does anyone speak here? Let's go." A dark-haired boy of about 12 years old came out. Although he spoke with a strong accent, he was understandable. "My name is Rob. I fell behind the tabor, and they took me to the police. And then Frank came and bought me. Bought me, usually for money." The boy smiled as if he were talking about everyday things. Benjamin was struck by this very ordinariness. He asked the boy Rob, "Do you know where we are? At least what country it is?" "No. I only know there's a sea nearby." "Come, I'll show you your place." Rob gestured with his words. And Benjamin realized that boys find it easier to explain themselves that way. The boy led Benjamin deep into the barracks and pointed to an empty bunk. This is where Mark slept. He used to swear a lot as a master, and recently Mark had died. Now his place was vacated. Benjamin was afraid to touch the bed on which not long ago his predecessor had slept. It was unknown what illness that man had suffered from, so the mere thought of having to sleep on this bed made the man feel sick. He resolutely removed the dirty bedclothes. But Rob exclaimed warningly, "We can't, Betty will swear. We have to do the laundry, but we can't go out." Rob, through gestures and other words, began to explain to the newcomer the simple rules of life on the farm owned by Frank and Betty. From his story, Benjamin realized that the couple were very greedy and did not pay their workers. In this barracks lived those that Frank paid for out of his own wallet. These people are considered his property. But at the other end of the farm, there is a house where hired laborers live. To them, the owner pays but little. At the end of his story, the boy added Frank has a large farm with many horses and cows. There are chickens and goats. I look after the horses, and the women go to the fields. Are there any women here? Rob pointed to a remote corner, separated from the rest of the room by a curtain. Benjamin was completely blown away. Is there such a thing in the world? The Middle Ages. And what are the authorities looking at? The man did not yet realize that in the place where he got, there are completely different laws. It's useless to prove anything to those paid for by the owner. This year's spring had come especially quickly, already at the end of April all around for the green chalk, and the air was filled with pleasant aromas. But Molly had no time to admire the desiring nature. She had only 2 hours in reserve to have time to prepare lunch for the children and then go to her second job in a beauty salon. More than 4 years had passed since her husband's mysterious disappearance, but nothing was known about him. The woman hoped that that last call would be the thread that would clarify what had happened. The next day, she went early in the morning to the bus depot where her husband had worked for many years. For several hours, Molly sat in the waiting room, waiting for the head of the company. And all this time, a young secretary from Pepeliev gave her a disgruntled look. When the working day was nearing its end, "The girl with irritation," said the woman. "I told you in English that today will not be. You're sitting here for nothing." The tone of this makeup-addled girl angered Molly. "Why are you talking to me like that?" The secretary cut her off. "Because you're interfering with my work. You're sitting there like a statue. For your information, statues stand. And don't be rude to me." The girl slowed down a bit. You're forcing me to talk like this. I warned you right away that the director is unlikely to show up today. He has an important meeting, and I have an equally important matter to attend to. My husband is missing. And by the way, your employee called me and said he was in trouble. And before that he left on the assignment of your director at night in the neighboring region. The secretary resented the woman. Why are you making up stories here? As I understood from your long speech that your husband is Benjamin, you have understood everything correctly. And he disappeared after the night flight. The girl laughed hysterically. What are you talking about? Benjamin works during the day. Maybe he was traveling at night on his own business and forgot to inform you. Benjamin is a prominent man. He gets a lot of looks from our inspectors. Molly, I was very uncomfortable with the gossip, so she laid a siege to the girl. What are you implying? The very thing you just thought of. And don't take it out on the chief. Look elsewhere for your spouse. The verbal altercation took away the strength of the secretary and the visitor, and both women were silent for a while. After a moment's silence, the girl spoke in a more friendly tone. I advise you to come early tomorrow. I always start the working day in my office and then go about my business. And your husband has an early departure in the morning, too. I'm sure you'll meet your non-displayer alive and well. Molly thought this advice was right, and even thanked the girl. She did not say anything to the children, although the twins pestered her all evening with questions. Mommy, where is Daddy? He promised us we'd go fishing. Don't bother me. You see that I don't have time. Daddy's a little late because he had some important things to do. Molly, she had nothing to say to the children, so she was careful to pretend that she was busy with household chores. But if the little ones could get away with a simple excuse, it didn't work on the older kids. The first to sound the alarm was the daughter. After dinner, she stayed in the kitchen and began washing dishes. The girl was the first to start an unpleasant conversation. Mom, I have a bad feeling. Something must have happened to my father. We should report him to the police. The woman didn't say anything to her daughter about her father's call, but only asked Adriana, let's wait another day. I went to the bus depot today, but I didn't catch my father's boss. I'll go again tomorrow. I hope that everything will be clearer, but David was absent the next day. And on the other days of the working week, the secretary was no longer behaving so brazenly. She was confused. We're all in shock ourselves. The director is not at home. His wife is worried too. He hasn't been admitted to the hospital. We're all on edge here. We don't know what to think. A week later, the secretary called Benjamin herself. On her last visit, Molly had asked her for this favor. The girl's voice was excited. David has left, but where even his wife doesn't know. We've got a real mess going on in the accounting department with a huge audit. Sorry, Benjamin never showed up. No, he didn't call work either. Oh, what's gonna happen to all of us now? The last thing Molly cared about was the fate of the bus depot. After a week of waiting, she suddenly realized something serious had happened to her husband. The dam of patience burst into tears, and she burst into womanizing lamentations. Ben, who did you leave us for? How will I live without you? The feeling of hopelessness deprived the woman of the will to resist. After sobbing, she fell into a state of apathy. Molly didn't know how to go on. After all, her husband was the main support in the family. He solved every problem. She had no idea how she would cope without him. Her imagination painted the most terrible pictures. But she tried to pull herself together. If the sketch, well, then our family will fall apart. I can't be weak. For the sake of the children must gather strength and a huge effort of will. She managed to withstand this blow of fate. After a week of waiting, she told Adriana, "You were right. You should have reported it missing right away." My daughter remarked, "Mom, I had a feeling this was going to happen from the beginning. We've lost a whole week waiting for something. What if Daddy got into some kind of trouble and he needed our help? Daughter, that's all I think about all day long. But how can we help him if we don't even know where he is?" The next morning, the woman went to the police station where she lived. The officers on duty looked at her indifferently. "We accept applications only if more than 3 days have passed since the disappearance. The husband has been missing for over a week. It's the 8th day. Have you checked with anyone at work?" "Yes, I've already called everyone." And at work there were round faces, and the policemen reluctantly said, "Okay, write a report." The officer on duty said it as if he was doing the unfortunate woman a favor. When she gave him the statement, he reread it several times. Then he scratched the back of his head. "I'll pass on your application, but no one can guarantee a quick result. People go missing in droves. We look for them, and then they find themselves. And then it turns out that someone disappeared at the cottage, and someone found a new family. That happens too." The duty officer was amused, and he looked at the applicant with a smile. Molly didn't answer anything. She went home and tried to distract herself from her bad thoughts. The best means of switching was homework. Molly, she decided to do a general cleaning, having caught her mother in the midst of her hectic activities. Adriana did not ask any unnecessary questions. She quickly changed her clothes and got down to work with excitement. When everything in the house sparkled, the daughter thoughtfully said, "Mommy, they say that love saves even at a distance. I never did, but now I pray every day. I ask God to help Daddy and us. I love my daddy very much." A woman with tears in her eyes said, "Daughter, I love him very much too." Weeks passed, then months. Summer replaced fall, and then the snowfalls surrounded their roundelay. All the savings that she and her husband had been diligently saving were coming to an end. They had to cut back on some expenses, but still there was not enough money even for the most necessary things. One day Jack came home from school with a fever. Molly rummaged through the medicine cabinet, but found no fever-reducing powders. She called her daughter Adriana. "You didn't happen to have a drop by any chance, did you?" "Change." "Jack says we don't have anything. I couldn't even find an aspirin tablet." The girl rummaged through her purse, but found a few coins. "Mom, I've got a little more on my card. I'll run to the pharmacy." All night the little brother was delirious. In the morning, he had a bad cough. We had to call a doctor from the children's clinic. Long examined and listened to the child. "Your baby has bronchitis, so we need to get serious about treatment. I'll prescribe you some medication. Will you take them according to the regimen?" The doctor wrote out several prescriptions, and before leaving warned her not to skip taking the medicines in any case, otherwise the process could move to the lungs. Molly nodded her head in agreement. She thought about where she could get the money to buy the medicine. Adriana looked silently at her sick brother. When the doctor left, she said firmly, "Mom, this can't go on any longer. I will look for a job." "No, daughter, your studies are more important than anything else." "Mom, don't be silly. How can I think about higher matters when my loved ones are in a critical situation? For now, I'll try to combine work and study or transfer to a correspondence school. I'm sure the dean's office will understand my situation. And if they say no, then I'll take a year off." Molly tried to talk her daughter out of it, but she wouldn't listen. "Mom, we don't have money for Jack's medicine today, and tomorrow we'll have nothing to buy bread with, and we have no one to ask or borrow from." The woman said thoughtfully, "You're right. No one can help us. My sisters and brothers are scattered all over the world. I don't know my dad's family at all, and I'm ashamed to ask. I'm not used to bowing down even to my relatives." In the memory of a mother with many children, an unpleasant incident that occurred almost immediately after the birth of twins Jack and Benjamin. She and her husband were planning to buy an upholstered corner because there were not enough beds in the new apartment, the keys to which they were handed at City Hall. But the double joyous occasion was overshadowed by her own sister, when Molly asked her for a small sum not enough to buy furniture. The sister said with a sneer, "Why have so many children if you cannot provide for them? It's only a way to spread poverty around the world. You should rely on your own income." After this sermon, the sister still held out the money, but Molly did not take it. She wouldn't even accept gifts from her sister afterwards, and the resentment against her sister is still a thorn in her heart. But that incident became a lesson for life. Therefore, under any circumstances, the mother of many children got used to relying only on her own strength. The only people she could turn to were her parents, but the father and mother have long left this world. The youngest daughter could no longer count on their help. The days flashed by, and there was no news of her husband. Molly went to the police station every week to see how the search for her husband was going. At first, she was greeted with respect and promised to make every effort to find the missing man. Later, regret was replaced by irritation, and at best the response was something like this: "Citizen, we will inform you ourselves. If something becomes known, why beat your feet in vain? And our employees should not be distracted by trifles." Not careful statement of the duty officer only increased the heartache. Molly, she realized that it was necessary to act more persistently, and she began to demand a meeting with the head of the department. Negotiations with the duty officer almost resulted in a conflict. The woman asked him nicely at first, but he only smirked mockingly. "Woman, how many times can I explain to you that searching for missing persons is a very complicated process that requires human and financial resources? And you are not alone among the victims. That's why you should wait instead of bothering us. Even the head of our department can't help speed up the search because you have limited resources." Desperation overwhelmed the unfortunate woman, and she blurted out, "I guess I should ask your ministry for help. Maybe then you will move and take all measures to find my husband." This threat had an unexpected effect on the duty officer. His eyes rolled out of his orbits, so much that they reached up to the visor of his headgear. He shouted at the female visitors, abruptly jumping to you. "Are you gonna threaten me? I'll put you in the monkey house for 3 days." At the shouting of the officer on duty, the staff of the department, among them, was a major. "What's going on here?" The duty officer, pointing his finger at Molly, began to complain about her again. "She's a lunatic. She's annoying everyone. She comes to the station every week like a job. She's always looking for her husband. And today she started threatening me. And I'm on duty, by the way." But the accusatory speech, the face of the duty officer had the opposite reaction on the major. He looked at his subordinate so that he even sat down. After that, the officer approached Molly and kindly suggested, "Come with me to the office. There you will calmly tell me everything in detail." The woman spent almost 2 hours in the office of the deputy chief of the police department. She told him about what had happened in great detail. The major listened to her attentively, and several times picked up the phone and called somewhere. During the conversation with the higher rank, it turned out that the application she had written earlier had disappeared without a trace. Therefore, the woman had to write a new application. After the conversation with the major again appeared hope, which Molly tried to keep in her heart. But days passed, and there was still no news about the whereabouts of her missing spouse. At the sound from the kitchen, Molly realized her daughter was home. Molly realized that her daughter was already home. "Adriana," the mother shouted from the kitchen, "I managed to get out early today." The woman walked tiredly into the kitchen. Adriana asked, "Can I warm the tea, or will you wait for lunch? I've already got the cage soup almost ready. You know, I dug up a marvelous recipe on the internet. Minimal ingredients, but it should be delicious." Molly smiled. "If you don't praise yourself, others may not." "Well done, daughter. I think I'll wait for your signature dish." "That's right. Don't let the skewering interfere with your appetite. We can taste it for another 10 minutes. The boys should be coming from school by now." Pacifying the situation and the thieves. The daughter's voice had a Molly relaxing effect on her, and she covered her eyes. Adriana looked at her mother's haggard face, and she wanted to cry. The girl thought, "Why do we need all this suffering? Why have so many troubles fallen on our family at once?" But she did not voice these thoughts aloud. Quietly said, "Mommy, you should lie down and rest at least an hour, and I'll take a little trip on my own." "Thank you, daughter. I've really made you angry. I'm gonna go lie down for half an hour." The short rest helped to restore her strength, and Molly felt more awake. She looked at her watch, and "Oh, my daughter, why did you push me so hard? I'm late for the salon. Adriana realized her slip-up and started making excuses. Mom, I'm sorry I had to run around with the boys while I fed them. Then Ben gave me a math problem, and I forgot you had to work. At least I won't have time to eat. I'll eat later tonight. I'll try to be quicker. The girls always let me off early, and the landlady doesn't make me work long hours. The main thing is to keep everything clean. Where's Mike? He hasn't shown up yet. Probably hanging out with his buddies again. Molly. She dashed out the door and hurried into the salon. On the way, she thought about her middle son. The older he got, the more he looked like Benjamin. The same behavior and even the same conversation. Mike was in his senior year of high school and dreamed of becoming a programmer, although he had no bad inclinations. His mother was concerned that he spent most of his time at the computer. Repeatedly, the woman tried to change his unhealthy lifestyle. Mike, you're withering, Mike, in front of that monitor. Your peers do sports, and you do not even go out for a walk. It's not healthy. We sit like this. The son only smiled. Mom, in fact, life itself is harmful because it inevitably leads to a fatal end. But I will take into account your recommendations and try to improve. The son kept his promise and a few days later showed his mother a season ticket to the swimming pool. You see, Mom, I decided to increase my physical activity. For a month I will swim twice a week. The woman was surprised, but such a subscription is not cheap. Where did you get it? The guy proudly said he bought it with his own money. Molly had heard a lot about gambling addiction and was horrified. Mike, do you place bets? The young man laughed out loud. Do you think badly of me? No, I'm not into that kind of thing. I just show my acquaintances some services for a small fee. First, I wanted to buy new sneakers. Then, when I was introduced, I decided to spend the money to improve my health. The son's explanation looked plausible, and the woman calmed down. After swimming, Mike took up jogging and then saved up money for a bicycle. This purchase caused delight in the twins. True, Adriana did not experience similar emotions. Once the mother heard her daughter condemning her brother for irrational spending. Mike, our mom's running around like a dog in a wheel. And instead of buying something useful for the house, you spend money on nonsense. Molly, and then she stepped in and supported her son. Daughter, don't judge so harshly. The bicycle and other things that your brother bought with his own money are not superfluous in our family. Therefore, Mike also makes a useful contribution to our common welfare. It was no more than a 5-minute brisk walk to the beauty parlor where she worked from home. Molly was raised when any kind of work was considered honorable. Therefore, she took responsibility for her duties. Why was she valued in the team? The only disadvantage of such work is the low salary. Therefore, after the first year of hard life without her husband, she had to look for a second job. At first, the woman tried to get a job in a confectionery shop where she could work in her specialty. But when at one enterprise she showed her diploma, a female employee of the personnel department laughed at her. Your document has long since lost its relevance. You have not worked in your specialty, and we have implemented modern technologies in production. But I can offer you a vacancy of sorters on the conveyor. But as a mother of many children, you're unlikely to be satisfied with shift work. Molly went to other organizations in the city, but did not find anything suitable. When she was desperate to find additional income, a neighbor suggested that a part-time cleaner is urgently needed in a shopping center. Now, every day in the morning, she runs to the store, and in the afternoon, she cleans up the beauty salon. Molly put on a robe and, trying not to interfere with the masters, began to work. She liked to watch the magical process of transforming women into beauties. She herself dreamed of sitting one day in a chair in front of a huge mirror and see herself there with a neatly arranged hairstyle. But even a simple haircut for her became an unacceptable luxury, and she was content with an old-fashioned ponytail on the back of her head. The girls had repeatedly suggested to Aunt Molly, "Let's do something amazing. You have such gorgeous hair." The service was offered free of charge, but the woman refused such offers, referring to the fact that it is uncomfortable for her to walk with a haircut. Since the salon was serviced by appointment, there were never queues here, and in the afternoon there were few visitors at all. So Molly, after the initial cleaning, decided to take a little break in a vacant chair. Her gaze froze on the hands of Jenna, who was working with a status client. This lady visited the salon once a month and always spent a few hours here. This time the client decided to get a haircut and at the same time to chat with the master. Molly was not in the habit of listening to other people's conversations, and when the client's cut strands began to fall to the floor, she went to the back room to get a brush. The lady continued to resent something, and the master vigorously nodded her head in agreement with her. The cleaning lady heard a phrase that alarmed her. "Jenna, you have no idea how I felt when I saw that scene of humiliation. I never thought it could happen in this day and age. It's slavery. But the amazing thing is that this man looked familiar. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think he worked as a bus driver and even once helped me a lot when I had to throw things to my parents in the village." She's a master, trying to keep the conversation going. "Nickel, it happens a lot when people seem familiar." No, Jenna, it was definitely him, that driver, and I remember his face well. And he had this distinctive way of speaking. He pronounces the R's cleanly, so to speak. It's very funny. It's a defect usually seen in children. This is a grown man." The cleaning equipment slipped out of Molly's hands. Her mouth immediately felt dry. Half turned around and grudgingly remarked, "Molly, you frightened me. Please be careful, or I might accidentally hurt a customer with scissors." "Jenna, I'm sorry. It was an accident." The little incident forced the buddies to change the subject. Molly was shaking with excitement. She remembered how Benjamin had taught Mike to pronounce the letter R long ago. Her husband had picked out poems with words that had that letter in them. He had even gotten some methodologies, a speech therapist, and had given his son lessons. The constant growling irritated not only Molly herself. Neighbors began to speak out. One grandfather even suspected them of mistreating animals. One day he waited for Molly on the landing and said everything he thought if this lawlessness did not stop. "I'll report you for an unfortunate animal," screaming in different voices. "How could you make it up to suffer like that? Poor thing." Molly tried to calm the neighbor down. "We don't have pets." Then who's always growling at Mike, who's being held by his mother's hand, started poking loudly, just like his father had taught him. Grandpa flinched. Then he spat in his heart and went home. God sent a child from the neighbors to teach him to growl. They're fooling around and scaring people. Molly remembers how they had a long laugh with her husband at the old man mastering the unruly letters. It took months. But Mike completely got rid of his speech impediment. True, the lessons did not pass without consequences, and for the most homeschooled Benjamin began to emphasize this unfortunate letter during conversation, when he clogged up. Going over all of this in her mind, Molly followed Jenna's client as she headed for the exit with her hair beautifully folded. The cleaning lady rushed to follow. As she walked, she tossed Svetlana a look. On a minute, master shrugged. "For God's sake, Molly, I don't care if you can leave for 2 or 5 minutes. The main thing is that everything is in order here." Arthur's week clearly lingered at the exit, where one wall was completely covered with mirrors. She smiled at her reflection. Noticing Molly, she asked, "Really good job." "Yes, that haircut really suits you." "Oh, Jenna, very light-handed. That's why I didn't even think about changing masters." The client went outside, and Molly followed. Nickel looked at her in surprise. "Do you have something to do with me?" "Yes. How did you guess?" "I'm a lawyer, and I often find myself in this situation. I hate being followed." That last phrase was thrown in with a lot of pressure in Molly. She felt embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. It's just that I wanted to ask you about that man." The women, stunned, but the indignant voice rang out. "Madam, what are you trying to torture me for? I have hundreds of cases. I can't quite put my finger on who it's about." Nickel had apparently forgotten about her recent conversation with Jenna, or the story didn't mean much to her. So Molly had to clarify. I'm referring to the man who emphasizes the letter R. You said you'd met him before. I really need to find out the details, because my husband disappeared 4 years ago, and he had this peculiarity. Molly was crying her eyes out and scared by Arthur's reaction. She tried to calm her down. My dear, what are you so close to the heart? I'll take, although I understand you perfectly and do not even know how I would behave if my husband disappeared. But I was spared such a fate, and my husband is alive and well, and even happy, probably. True, he now pleases another woman. Nickel began to speak and led Molly to a small alley. I'll tell you everything now. Just don't cry. Now we'll sit here on a bench and talk. From Nickel's story, and with frequent distractions to other topics, Molly realized that the woman had met a Benjamin-like man in a small town. On her recent trip, the interlocutor regretfully remarked, "My buddy and I were traveling by car, and I was trying to remember the name of the townships. I only remember that it was a very small town, but cozy and clean. We decided to stop by the local market where we could buy farm products. That's where it all happened. This man was standing at the counter looking so lost that I was immediately attracted to him. Then I took a closer look at him and realized that I had met him somewhere before, but I didn't immediately remember where. So I asked him about it, but he didn't have time to answer me, because a man with a gray beard jumped on him and started hitting him in the face." Molly flinched, right in front of people. Yeah, it shocked me too. But what was most surprising was that the local police did not pay any attention to this fact. There were plenty of them in that market, and there was something with a beard, something incomprehensible. I tried to interfere, but he swung his fist at me too. Of course, their policeman reacted to this lunge, but not as I expected. In broken English, I was asked to leave the market to avoid trouble. Such an attitude towards guests, of course, angered me. But my friend took me away by force. The very unpleasant residue remained after that. Nickel described the man in detail, and almost all the features coincided with the appearance of Benjamin. Only Molly's husband was quite sturdy physique and always aspired to demigod. And the man the woman had met was thin and had an unkempt mop of hair on his head. Nickel clearly felt embarrassed by the fact that she couldn't remember any other details of this minute encounter. She handed Molly a business card with the words, "You will call me when you have a free moment. Maybe I'll remember something else important. I'll call my friend." I'm sure she remembered a detail that slipped my mind. I can't admit that I was so outraged by the unpleasant scene and the indifferent attitude of the police that I was completely overwhelmed by my emotions. Nickel warmly said goodbye and soon disappeared from sight. And Molly was still sitting on the bench, pondering over the woman's story. She was afraid to believe in that random ray of hope again. After all, so many times over the past 4 years, hopeful information had appeared that later turned out to be useless. When she returned home, the older children immediately rushed to her with questions. They must have realized from her confusion that something unusual had happened. Molly, she decided that there was no point in hiding from the children what Nicole had told her. Adriana was the first to share her impressions. "I don't even think it's a string, but a good rope. Mom, you go tomorrow to see that major who keeps promising you. Tell him. Maybe it'll get him on the trail." Hitherto silent, Mike reasonably pointed out that it's a long shot. Exactly, our police officers will not even move if the father got to another country. And there is every reason to believe that all this is the case. We must act through the embassy, and this is a very long and thorny way. I have another suggestion. I'll try social media. Adriana went after her brother. It never occurred to you before. It's a brilliant idea. As you can see, I couldn't. Just today it dawned on me. Well, you should, or better yet, several. The big sister wanted to take another jab at Micah, but Molly firmly shut her down. Calm down. What are you doing with each other? Like cat and dog grown-ups behaving worse than twins. In the spirit of shock, Adriana went to her room and Mike headed for the hallway. Mom, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna walk around for a while. and you go find some better pictures of Dad." The next day, Nicole showed up at the salon herself. She called Molly. It turns out that my friend managed to make a few shots in that market, although it was very risky. Tourists are not allowed to photograph anything there, except monuments. In spite of the poor quality of the pictures, it was possible to distinguish the facial features of a thin man in a white cap. But Molly had no doubt that the photo was of her missing husband. "It looks like him, but I'm not sure. You can give me those pictures." "Sure, I'll text them to your smartphone." Molly's face is covered. Thick paint. "I have a cheap phone with buttons." Nicole calmed the woman down. "It's not a big deal. There are plenty of other ways." In the evening, Nicole emailed the photo to Micah. He rubbed his hands together happily. "The ice is broken. Gentlemen of the jury, I'm pretty sure our search is reaching the finish line. By the way, Mom came to the station." Molly just waved her hands. "They said the major was very busy. He didn't have time for me. So I came back empty-handed. Maybe you really can do something, son. I can't promise anything, but the process is already underway. We can only wait and hope." Mike's optimistic attitude passed on to his mother, and for the first time in years she fell asleep peacefully. But even as she slept, the thought of her husband never left her mind. Rob sat in front of an empty plate and lost his skinny stomach with longing. It wouldn't take long to lose one's legs on speeches like that. He looked meaningfully at Benjamin, waiting for his approval, but the boy's friend and mentor remained silent. The man looked pityingly at his companion, who had not changed much in more than 4 years. Only the murdered voice testified that it was no longer a boy, but a young man. Rob rolled his eyes dreamily, wishing he could break free as soon as possible. "The first thing I'm going to do is eat my fill." Amin grinned. Who would Rob complain to? Not you. You're the only one who can walk freely all over the world. You could have stopped by the girls' greenhouse, and they would have fed you strawberries or tomatoes. The young men shook their black holes. "Keep your pocket wide, and they'll feed you." Girls are afraid to sneak berries themselves. Kelly wanted a berry. Betty beat her on the back with a stick so hard she couldn't sleep for a week. "Tell me, Amen, where do such greedy people come from?" Did the young woman shrug her shoulders? "I don't know, Rob. It's not our way. I never met people like that before I came here. I dream about the house every night too, and my folks probably think I'm dead. That's why they don't look for me. They've probably forgotten about me too." Vicky sadly dropped the phrase and hurried off the dirty dishes behind the partition. At the end of the barracks, the hand had no choice but to leave the table. The boy was still rubbing his stomach and complaining about his fate. "I'm so hungry, I think I could swallow a bull." Benjamin, in his years in captivity, was used to such scenes. But with all his desire, he could not change anything yet, because the farm was well guarded by the hired Frankmans with few checks. The slightest provocation of the forced laborers was severely punished, and often the punishment was with the use of brute physical force. For the first few months, Benjamin was severely punished for disobedience. The inhabitants of the barracks were wary of him at first, but then the relations gradually improved. Each of these unfortunate people had a different story to tell. For example, the women were enslaved by their own carelessness. Both girls, Amin and Waiki, spoke passable English and were from near Asian countries. Like many of their compatriots, they had gone to earn money, but on the way they had gotten into trouble. Amin was eager to tell everyone how she had been deceived. "My friend and I found a job through the internet, called The Factory. We were told to come, packed our things, and started looking for a shuttle bus also through the internet. At first it was fine. We were being driven to Washington, D.C., but the driver halfway through said he had to go to a gas station and turned off the road. He said then all the boys and girls arrived. We were scared and started screaming, but masked men came and started forcibly beating us with sticks. They kept us in the forest in some hut for a few days, and then they brought us here." Amin told her story as if it had not happened to her, but to a completely different person. Benjamin realized afterwards that the feeling dulled with time. Almost the same trouble happened to Vicky, who was older than Eamon. She is a beautiful woman with bottomless black eyes, left at home with her kids, whom she raised without a husband. Her husband died of a trivial infection because there was no medic in the settlement. By the time they got to the nearest hospital, the man had burned to death. Vicky was a little wordy and did not like to talk about herself. After work, she was always huddled in a corner and could sit for hours with a blank stare. One day, Benjamin wanted to just talk to the woman, but Vicky was even more withdrawn. It is not customary for a woman to talk to another man. It is considered a terrible sin. The man was surprised. "I don't see anything wrong with talking a little." Vicky exclaimed, "No, it's better not to. What if my husband's relatives find out?" Benjamin didn't try to make friends, but only remarked that we are already more related than relatives. How does a famous song go? There were 2 other men in the barracks, about 50 years old, but they kept to themselves and did not understand English or pretended not to. Benjamin had learned to read people's thoughts from their facial expressions during his many years of parenting practice. And soon he realized that these men simply did not want to come into contact with other settlers. These men were fed separately and taken somewhere else to work. Benjamin himself was literally a handyman for the first year. All day long he loaded and unloaded cars and wagons. But the meager food and excessive workloads weighed down his body, and one morning the man felt he couldn't get up. He asked Rob to run to the master. Soon Frank appeared in the barracks. He was shouting and waving his arms. Rob had already gotten a little of his foreign language and translated. Swearing, "The master says at you that you are a weakling, and he paid a lot for you." Benjamin clenched his teeth, so unbearable was the pain in his back. Said Rob, "And tell him to return the shoddy merchandise. I would love to return to my homeland." With the role of translator, the boy coped badly, but it seems Frank understood from the meaning of what was said and showed Benjamin his fist. But the boss didn't mock the sick worker. He muttered something and left, but Betty came running in with a jar of stinky stuff. She gestured for the man to roll over onto his stomach. The woman set a nasty potion into his back, and he was immediately relieved. Betty set the jar down and instructed in her own language. Rob translated, "She told you to dab every hour. You can't get sick here. You have to work here. If you work hard, you'll get food." Benjamin shuddered at the unpleasant associations of an amazing regimen and something not good. He reminded me of our not-so-long-ago history. No one supported him. And Benjamin thought it unlikely that his companions had studied history from the same textbooks he had sung over in his school days. The next day, Benjamin felt better and headed for the warehouse. But there he was met by Matthias, the big guy who had taken him and the worm on the first day. This guy preferred to speak in his native tongue too, but where necessary. He used to insert English words. He said the master had told Benjamin to help the women in the greenhouses for the time being. The man didn't object and went to his new place of work. What was his surprise when he met there, blithely, or rather, an old acquaintance was the first to rush to Benjamin with an exclamation of, "Who do I see? You're still alive." The encounter pleased the man. "Didn't expect to see you here, you see. Thought you'd been walking free for a while." The worm frowned. "Of course, I could have gone on the run if I'd had my winter gloves on. But here in this foreign land, I've got nowhere to go. I'd only get into more trouble." The worm didn't look well. His already thin face was shrunken even more, and his eyes glittered with feverish fire. Benjamin did not ask him how he was doing. He only asked him, "What is your real name?" The mountain man winked. "Alex, if the necessary facts from my past biography, I'll tell you honestly that I did 4 moves instead of very remote. If I hadn't fallen into the clutches of Kevin, I would probably be easing the wallets of citizens right now." This brief conversation was interrupted by a shout from Matthias. He disappeared for a time, and then suddenly reappeared, as if he had sprung out of the ground, crawled out, only managing to whisper, "Good thing we met. It will be easier for the 2 of us to get the hell out of here." For several months, Benjamin worked in the greenhouses and met Alex every day. In addition to Matisse, 2 guards watched over the work of the slaves. But even this tight control did not prevent the men from communicating. They began to think over a plan of liberation, and hope gave them strength. Once in passing, Alex whispered, "I know roughly where we are. It's a short walk to our border. If we manage to get a car, we could slip away." But Benjamin considered this plan redundant because only hired workers were allowed to the garage. They weren't exactly getting away with Alex, the prospect of getting in there. But fate decided to give an unexpected gift. One day it became known that the hard work did not bear the driver, which Frank mercilessly chased all day long. And this trouble happened just before Sunday, when Frank and his wife were taking their goods to the market. It should be said that there was always a long queue at their counter, because natural products were in great demand. Sometimes the owner took 2 cars to the market. Such a need arose when there was a lot of goods. So it happened that Sunday, Frank himself drove 1 car, and the second one was loaded to the brim, but without a chauffeur. Benjamin was just transporting sacks of approvals from the warehouse to the greenhouse. Noticing the confusion of the Lay family, he volunteered to help. "If you have difficulties, Mr. Frank, I can deliver the goods to the market." The landlord nodded his head often and unexpectedly. Benjamin realized that this chicken buy without translation understands English speech, but it was not his position to find out the peculiarities of communication. He took the driver's seat in the car and started the car. He delivered and loaded the goods and wanted to stay in the car. But Frank signaled for him to keep watch at the counter where the food was for sale. Benjamin had nothing else to do, and he obeyed. After this incident, the owner began to exploit him every Sunday, but Frank's kind attitude quickly changed to a hostile one. Once he even slapped an employee in the face with his fist in public. Benjamin was a little distracted by a lady in a straw hat. He couldn't hear what the woman was asking him, but he realized that she was speaking in his native language. Frank noticed this and pounced on him, and the woman disappeared. Benjamin endured humiliation and beatings, only for one purpose: to break free. He saw her very rarely now, but he had an assistant he could trust. Rob made regular visits to the greenhouse and gave the sheet the information it needed. There was one vulnerable spot in the almost completely polished plank. Every evening, Frank took not only the keys to the cars, but also locked the garage on 2 additional locks to get into the metal structure. In any other way was impossible. But Benjamin was used to difficulties. After all, they ordered the character. An inner voice told him that his involuntary captivity would soon be over. This thought was suggested to him by the strange question of the frame. "Uncle Ben, when we are free, will you go to your house?" The man was taken aback. "Of course, and you'll find your folks too." Tears glistened in the boy's eyes. "I won't. I don't know where to find them. And besides, there were no relatives of mine in that camp." "How did you end up there?" "I don't know. I guess I was a stray or a drop-off. So I thought I'd better stay here. The heat's bad, but you can still get something to eat every day." The boy's confession turned the man's heart upside down. He didn't promise him anything, but he thought he was obliged to take care of him. The opportunity came quite unexpectedly. Betty was ill. Benjamin saw an ambulance arrive, and then the landlady got into it and drove away. Frank, apparently feeling free, brought 2 ladies to the farm in the evening. Then some other guests arrived, and the party began. To be honest, Benjamin hadn't thought the owner was capable of such a thing. It was the first time he'd seen outsiders here in all the time he'd been here. By the time it got dark, everyone was already pretty good. Benjamin looked tensely at the cars. A worm, or rather an Alex, and his past nickname was long forgotten, approached him. "You're thinking the same thing." "What?" "And I'm thinking there won't be another opportunity. When you have to wait until you fall asleep. You've thought about the direction again." "Good. You tell me the framework." "Yes, absolutely. Meet me at 200 hours. He's back in his barracks. We need to act as natural as possible so no one suspects anything." Then lay down. He wasn't afraid to fall asleep, even though he was terribly tired. Bill's whole body was trembling. According to Sasha's calculations, they should reach the border in less than an hour. The main thing was that no one would try to stop them. But Alex assured that there were no settlements up to the border, and they would pass it through the leaf. The main thing is to get to their own. And then it's over. Exactly at 2:00 a.m., Benjamin went outside, as if to go to the toilet. Rob whispered that one car was open. 5 minutes later appeared, and Ron with Sashka quietly sat at the wheel of the car. Well, with God, they silently climbed into the car, then pulled the wires by feel, and the car started. He drove out of the yard with no lights on. Then he turned on the headlights and stepped on the gas. A few seconds later, Rob shouted, the lights in the house came on. Now everything depended only on Boris's skill. He was going at the maximum possible speed. The car was shaking and tossing. Roads this something could be called only remotely. Strange, but no one caught up with them. Although perhaps they were just lagging behind. After a while, a desperate race, Alex shouted over there. Here illegals are transported. Ben only had time to think that if they take illegals, then maybe the road is guarded. A man jumped out of the bushes and pointed a gun at them. Ben returned the man, flew off into the bushes, and almost immediately heard a palpitation. He hit the gas. There were some posts up ahead. Ben, not slowing down, passed the place and shouted, Alex. Rob skipped. Rob immediately said Alex won't answer anymore. Benjamin looked at the seat next to him and realized why Alex didn't answer. He was staring ahead with empty eyes. There was blood all over the seat. Shit. They had already driven about 10 kilometers, even jumped out on some new asphalt road when they heard a loudspeaker behind them. They were being ordered to stop, in plain English. Benjamin saw a barrier of cars ahead and stopped. Uniformed men immediately ran up to them and put them on the ground. We are our own. We are Americans. We were held as slaves. One of the uniformed men said, That's interesting. I've been hearing more and more of this kind of information lately. Get in the car. We're gonna take care of this. Loud Benjamin was helped up, put into a beater with bars, and the car started. Ben leaned back in the seat and closed his eyes. Was this really it? Was his torment over? Was it so pitiful for Sashka that he wanted to cry? After all, not later a man at all. Then prison, then knuckles, then slavery. Molly was spinning in the kitchen. Yesterday they gave her a paycheck. She and Adriana had gone to the store, bought strictly according to the list of groceries. Now she was distributing them. At the same time, she and Adriana were discussing what and when to cook so as not to repeat themselves, so that the food would last as long as possible. Adriana wrote everything down so that whoever was going to cook would just look at the number and already cook. This arrangement helped them survive and even save a little money. Molly looked over at her daughter. Adriana is strange today, as if she is talking to her with her thoughts somewhere far away. Daughter, is something wrong? Adriana shuddered. No, Mom. Why would you think that? But you're thinking about something all the time. The girl put aside her notebook and pen and sighed. I can't hide anything from you, Mom. Molly sat down next to her. Adriana, but I'm the mom, and you're my baby. Is that weird? Why don't you tell me what happened? The woman was nervous. Not enough trouble in the family. Did something happen to her daughter too? Adriana spoke. You see, Mom, at university I was courted by a guy called James. He was a year older than me. And then I left, and of course I didn't leave him any coordinates. I didn't think we were going anywhere. Why would he want me with my problems? Molly sighed. Here it begins. And the girl continued. But he was stubborn. He was looking for me. He found me. And Adriana looked fearfully at her mother. Mom, he wants us to get married, you know. He wants to come to visit, to meet you. Molly smiled. What are you afraid of? Mom, I don't know. What if he sees that we live poorly and doesn't want to see me anymore? Molly sighed. You will want to see him. After that, Adriana stretched out. No, of course not. Do you think we should give it a try? Call your James. I'll set it up. Go to the parlor. Take it from there. You make the stuffing while you're at it. Have him come over around 8 o'clock tonight. That's when the boys will be here. Let him meet them all at once." Adriana blushed. "Mom, I'm so worried for some reason." Molly put her arms around her and held her close. "It's okay, daughter." "Mommy, what about Daddy? We're gonna find Daddy. I can feel it." That evening, everyone in the house was in high spirits. Even Ben and Jack were in a good mood, trying not to yell, not to fight. It had been a long time since we'd had such an atmosphere. James turned out to be a tall, athletic-looking young man. Molly liked him because he had a completely open mind. The guy handed Molly and her a bouquet of flowers and Adriana a cake. Molly almost cried. Ben had always had money, hadn't on all the holidays given her flowers. It had been over 4 years since she had gotten them. "Come, James, meet our family." James gave Mike, Ben, and Jack a startled new look. Then he turned to Adriana. "You didn't tell me you had 3 brothers. That's so great. I'm the only one in the family. And I really missed having a brother or sister, not even a playmate for Mike, who had been staring tensely at the guests." He smiled with relief. "But what? Do we know how to play?" He threw a quick glance at the twins. The evening had gone splendidly. James, saying goodbye, asked Molly if I could come with my father. "That's kind of the way it's supposed to be." Molly smiled. "Yes, James, you can. Let's do it on Sunday." The thought of having absolutely no money for the wedding was already bouncing around in the woman's head. But her daughter is so happy. Molly is bound to think of something. She's already learned to find a way out of any situation. She'll find a way now, if Ben was with them. When the guy left, Molly asked her daughter Adriana, and James said with her father and mom. "Oh, and his mom died just 3 years ago. That's a shame." The time until Sunday flew by faster than she thought it would. She'd asked to be in the parlor early, promising she'd run out before the workday started to clean up, and set about setting the table. Of course, it had taken a splurge and would have to stretch what was left over in some incredible way. But Molly tried not to think about that right now. Adriana, when Molly asked about where her father worked, was confused and said, "Mom, I don't know. James doesn't talk about him much. I didn't ask. I've been there a couple times, but his dad's always at work." "Oh, you're so full of it. What's wrong with that? I'm marrying James, not his dad." They were just finishing setting the table. When the doorbell rang, Adriana rushed to open the door. Molly suddenly froze. The TV screen was showing footage of criminals being apprehended for trespassing. She wouldn't have paid much attention if it hadn't been for the announcer's words. The detainees claimed to have been in slavery in a neighboring country. Then came the footage of the detention itself, and the woman suddenly screamed "Ben" and immediately fell to the floor. Adriana ran in from the hallway, and the boys came running out of the room. "Mom, what's wrong?" Molly saw James and his father. "It's you. What's your timing?" James's father turned out to be the same major. Molly was angry with him for his inaction, but was glad it had worked out that way. The major is James' father. He would definitely help them now. One of the men shown looked like Benjamin. She was sure it was him, almost certain. After a while, they were all sitting around the table. The discussion of the wedding had somehow taken a back seat. Adriana was pacing around the room, and Molly was staring at one point. Everyone waited tensely while Mike and James did something on the computer. Anthony was waiting too. Finally, Mike exclaimed, "They found it." He turned the monitor toward them, and the screen flashed the footage of the show in which Molly had seen her husband. Everyone looked at the monitor. The detainees appeared. Mike stopped the broadcast and zoomed in a little on the photo. Adriana whispered. Molly's dad was silently crying. There was silence for a while. Finally, Molly turned to Father James. "Tell me what to do. I have to go there." He shook his head. "No one will let you in. It's a zone." On the other hand, If word of slavery holds true, then he'll be transferred. You know what? You'll be in touch, and I'll pull up the paperwork at work, look it over, get in touch with my coworkers. Molly nodded. And I'll go anyway. But I'll wait until you tell me something. Day 2 passed. Molly couldn't find a place to go. She longed to go to Benjamin, but she realized it was far away. What if he'd been moved somewhere else? She'd arrive, and he'd be gone. Anthony was silent. She called him several times, but each time the man answered she had to wait a little longer. Nothing was clear. Molly realized that something had to be done. The boys were not at all mischievous these days. They watched their mother anxiously. Anthony hung up the phone. That's it. David was taken. Now it was just a matter of doing the little things. Unravel the whole tangle. The major knew that the other slave hostages had also been freed. The authorities couldn't get away with it, and 15 more men had been taken from Frank's farm. Several of them were English. The rest were from neighboring republics. All the programs showed footage of the liberation. All the newspapers were full of headlines. A phone vibrated on the table. It was Molly. Anthony, what's going on? It's been 2 weeks. There's nothing on TV. Where's my husband? Where am I supposed to go? The major looked at his watch. You don't have to go anywhere. No, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. I'll pack up and go right away. I'm coming to your place right now. Molly froze. Is something wrong? Something's happened to Veppy. Don't worry, please. Nothing happened. I'll be right there. The major couldn't tell her anything because Benjamin had asked him to. They had recently spoken on the phone. In a few hours, the man would be home. Anthony stopped by to pick up his son on the way. James, do you have to come with me? Maybe you and Adriana can hold her mother. She's over there packing her bags. Rob looked longingly at the views flying by outside the window. So interesting. Forests, villages, small towns, and it's quite possible his parents live in them somewhere. It was, he realized, of course, that too much time had passed. He didn't remember anyone, and he himself had changed. Rob shifted his gaze to Benjamin. Until 2 days ago, Rob had no idea at all what he was going to do next. Of course, he'd been told they'd help him with something. But Rob realized that help couldn't last forever. And then Benjamin came up to him. What's up, Rob? What are your plans? The guy shrugged. I don't know. I've never really lived for nothing. Alone. Benjamin saw that the boy was confused, depressed. Put his hands on his shoulder. Is that what you're gonna do with me? I'll help you get settled. And my family is big and friendly. We won't let you go to waste. My son will be a little younger than you, so don't lose heart. Rob was happy at first, but then he thought, why should he disturb people who were strangers to him? He decided he'd stay a couple days, and then he'd leave. But Benjamin didn't say anything. Molly was really running around the house. There was a bag in the middle of the room, and she was throwing things in it. Mike followed her. Mom, where are you going? You don't understand. You don't understand, Mike. Something's happened to Daddy. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I can't get in touch with him. What if he's forgotten everything? If he doesn't remember us? If he doesn't know where to go? But don't talk nonsense, Anthony would say. He doesn't say anything. It's like he's hiding something from me. And you, Adriana, you could ask him in the family way. Mom's got Mike again. Mom, what are you saying? Did you scare the boys? Molly sat down on the couch and cried. She was so tired of waiting, of the unknown. What am I going to do? The doorbell rang. Adriana rushed to open it. Anthony and James entered the room. Molly, why won't you listen to me? How many times? How long can I listen to you? She raised her tearful eyes to the man. You're not telling me anything good. I'll go and find out for myself. You don't have to go anywhere. Molly jumped up. I don't even want to listen to you anymore. She was running around the room again. Molly. The woman slowly turned toward the door. Standing in the doorway was Benjamin. Thin and aged, but her dear Benjamin. She screamed and threw herself around his neck. He was flanked on all sides by children. For the first time in a very long time, Benjamin cried. Rob stood a little aside so as not to disturb them, and he was in tears himself. Adriana noticed the guys in the dark hallway first. She stared at him in surprise, and then panted. It was as Benjamin noticed the daughter's confusion. He, hugging Molly tightly, said, "Meet Rob. This is Rob. He and I were there together. Rob, nobody's here. Molly is a welcoming hostess." She pulled herself together and said, "Rob, come in, please." Then she stopped smiling. Benjamin got worried. "You're looking at him like he's a ghost." Benjamin didn't understand anything, and his boys were staring at Rob with their mouths hanging open. Adriana woke up first. She turned to Anthony and James and said, "Rob, come here. You're about to understand." Rob took a confused step forward and froze in the room. A guy was standing there looking at him. Rob realized that he and the guy were just a reflection of each other. Only the hair cut his wife's hair differently and the clothes. He turned to Benjamin as if looking for support, and then everyone looked at Anthony. He was sitting pale, holding his chest. "No way." Adriana went for Valerian. Molly helped Anatoly onto the couch, undid the top buttons of his shirt. Everyone realized that only Anthony could clarify anything. James was pale too. He didn't know what to think at all. When the major held on a little, he spoke. "Mom spent her whole life looking for you in the moment. So I stopped hoping you were alive a year after you went missing." James slumped down in his chair. "Dad, you mean Rob, don't you?" "James seems to think so, yes. You were little. Don't you remember anything? We had twins. You were always pining because you wanted a brother or sister. Actually, you were pining for your soulmate. They say twins can't be separated. It happened when you were 3. We were walking in the park. I went out to get a drink, and you kept running away from your mother. While she was catching you, your brother was running away. At some point, she turned around. Was your name Andrew?" "Andrew, no. I was already on the force then, and I couldn't do anything." Mom blamed her whole life, blamed herself, and she was quietly going crazy. She couldn't take it. Her heart stopped beating. 3 years ago, the longing ate it away. There was silence in the room. Ron couldn't even speak. "So it turns out he has a family after all," Anthony continued. "After 3 years, we moved to another city. But I was still always trying to do something. It was just so hard on my mom. She spent all her time in that park. I was afraid of losing her." Anthony stood up, walked over to Rob. He stared at him for a long moment, then hugged him tightly. A second later, James came up to them. There they stood, the 3 of them hugging each other and all 3 of them crying. Anthony turned to Molly and Benjamin. "You'll have to excuse us. We'll go and get our son and go. There's a lot to do now. We have to do the paperwork, rebuild the investigation, reopen. We'll go." Molly nodded, and the major took Rob's hand firmly in his. "Well, Sonny home. It's been 6 months. Mommy's daddy. How I smiled at you. Benjamin, you're the most beautiful girl in the whole world." Molly stood hugging her husband and admiring her daughter too. Adriana twirled in front of the mirror in her wedding dress. Benjamin had been heavily compensated, and he said his daughter would have the real fancy wedding. Helen literally burst into the room. "Adriana's friend, and a witness at the wedding. All your neighbors are gathered at the driveway, and they're going to ransom Adriana." Benjamin laughed. "Well, that's good. My daughter is worth a lot." Adriana got worried. She should call, warn them. But Helen snorted. "Why not? Let them work it out for themselves." Benjamin laughed. "Don't worry. Rob would fool any crowd that way. Not only will they let them through, but they'll pay for it." Helen blushed, which did not escape Molly's gaze. She threw an understanding look at her husband and gave him a gentle push. "Something tells me another wedding is just around the corner." Helen heard Molly's words and became a whole new person. There was no telling how the conversation would have ended, but the boys came running into the apartment. Adriana looked fearfully at Molly's mother and hugged her. "What are you doing?" "Oh, Mom, I don't know. Everything will be fine. Don't worry." The loud voice was heard through the open windows. Every now and then those in the yard laughed. Adriana relaxed a little. Life was a very strange thing after all. Rob lived almost all the time as an unknown person, and now she couldn't imagine that James didn't have a brother. He fit in so well, it was like he was just going away for a little while. James told her that the next day they drove to the cemetery to visit his mother. Rob cried for a long time. There he sat on his knees by the grave. Now Rob was studying hard so that he could get his school certificate and go straight to school. Anthony had managed to arrange that Rob would just pass the exams, and he would be given a certificate. Adriana and James tried to help him. Many voices were heard in the hallway. James entered the room in a suit. He looked at Adriana and gasped. "Wow, why didn't you tell me you were so beautiful? Do I have to keep you in a burqa now?" She laughed. "No, I don't. I'm only going to look at you." Rob stepped in. "We're twins, and we're supposed to be the same. Someone should be looking at me too." He turned around. "And where's my witness?" Helen ran into the room to see if her makeup was okay. She spent 3 hours at the beauty parlor today. She came out when Rob called her, looked at him embarrassed. "Hello." Rob whistled. "Wow. I, on the other hand, would agree to have a beauty like that looking at me at all times." Helen flared up. Rob took her hand gently. "I'll be looking after the bride tonight. It's out of rank, but I won't let you out of my sight. Not to be taken away." Molly listened to the registrar's words and thought that life was unpredictable. Her husband was paying for someone else's sins. She was paying the price. They were all having a hard time. But if all that hadn't happened, Rob wouldn't have found his family. Anthony, son, it's all so interconnected. Rob had to cross paths with Benjamin, and Anatoly and his wife to move to this very city. And Adriana managed to get acquainted not only with the son of the major, but also with the father of the loud ones. "I declare you husband and wife." Molly got up, wiped at the running tears, looked at Mike, who was also with his girlfriend today. Here comes the start of her babies flying out of the house. Benjamin hugged her. "Don't be sad, my good ones too. Jack and Ben are still with us, and then the grandchildren will come." Molly smiled. "How do you know what I'm thinking?" "I know everything because I love you so much, and then there I knew for sure that you and I would meet." I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Chapter 1. The year 2065 has proven to be rich in interesting scientific inventions for the general public. Young Dr. Michael Holliday is inspired by his invention today. "Ethan, our invention is going to make us a fortune. I've already figured out how we're going to monetize it," said he inspirationally to his older colleague. "Michael, you're still very young and promising. We should think 10 times before we publicize our achievements. We invent with good intentions. If our invention falls into the hands of unscrupulous people, it becomes dangerous. Don't rush into monetization," said a senior colleague. "Ethan, how long can you and I stand on the sidelines of life, as if we are observers? It's time to dispel the myth that scientists are people who live in their own narrow world, that everything human is alien to us. You, for example, how long are you willing to put up with your wife's reproaches? While you are here thinking about good intentions and earns a lot of money, organizing leisure activities for rich companies, young and beautiful girls. You, of course, forgive me for my frankness on you, do not notice how long she has long put you in nothing. And all because of the fact that you have little money compared to her. You cannot at the right moment bang your fist on the table and put her in her place. It's time to end it," said Michael, inspired. "No, Michael, I think of people first. Not then you and I are morally responsible for our inventions. If someone breaks their fate, how do we live with that? How do we look civilization in the eye?" Ethan said, wiping his glasses. "Ethan, you're a golden man, but you're not practical. It's up to you. I've offered my solution. If you don't want to reap the fruits of your labor, it's your decision. I think I'll take the risk of realizing my grandiose plan. Don't complain later that I didn't give you enough. A couple of hours later, Michael was already talking passionately about his invention and his wife. Unlike his old colleague, his wife Adriana, knowing Kim, accepted his idea to get rich with joy. Michael, can you at least tell me what invention is the reason why you can't make a deal with this man? She asked. When the couple was daydreaming about the near future, we invented a method that helps any person to change his appearance to that of any other person. For example, any person can come to us and in a couple of hours become indistinguishable copies of their favorite star, said Michael. Is it makeup? Grinned we all know. Kina is not makeup, it's last century. We use a high-tech material that is no different from human skin. It won't wash off, it won't burn, it won't freeze. Nothing will happen. Even if someone takes a fist to the face, their face doesn't lose its beauty and integrity. And it costs pennies, Michael said. If it costs pennies, how are you going to make a fortune out of it? Wouldn't it make sense to make it more expensive? Adriana asked. You have to think 3 steps ahead. Get a new look. There's more to it than that. But people don't need to know all the secrets at once. After all, what they want is for any of their problems to be solved quickly and without hassle, and preferably for a nickel. With this task, I think we have coped. There is another stage at which the money will flow to us by the river. You'll just see. Trust your genius, said Michael dreamily, leaned back in his chair. And you can make a face for me. Megan Fox would love to have a face like that, said Adriana. No, honey, I don't want you to use our invention. I haven't told you everything. And we won't tell our clients everything. You don't need to change your appearance. You're already my prettiest, said Michael Holliday, hugging his wife. No, I don't. It's not a matter of principle for me. For me, it's about you realizing your vision so that we can finally afford our dream home, so that we can take advantage of services and stay away from the masses so that we get the best out of life. And then I'll find something to do and start my own business and earn money too, said Adriana know-it-all dreamily. But things were not so smooth in Ethan's family. His wife, the owner of the most popular escort agency in town, Betty, was not happy with her husband again today. I'm Benjamin all day long, and there's no one at home to take out the trash or water the flowers. She was outraged from the doorstep. Honey, I just got home from work too. Give me some time. I'll do everything, said Ethan, hurriedly putting his briefcase aside and pulling on an apron. I've given you the best years of my life. So what? I don't need you to do all the housework yourself. I just need to hire a proper domestic staff. You promised me that 3 years ago. Why don't you give up those inventions of yours? Those useless lab tests and come work for me? Betty asked her husband reproachfully. Betty, how can you imagine such a thing? Do you want me to quit science and go to work in your escort agency? Asked he with trembling hands, letting his glasses slip down his nose. What's the big deal? I've been in this business almost all my life myself from scratch, you could say. At first it took a long time to gain clients with our own hands and feet, and when the competition appeared, you went to a new level. I gathered young ladies and brought the service to a new level. You know, no shortage of customers, but managing staff is always a challenge. We need someone who knows how to get my girls out of unplanned situations. It's no big deal. But the money, the real money's out there. Ethan, said the wife, waving her hands in front of her husband. While the mother and father were arguing, their daughter Christina woke up. Don't you miss you for 7 days? Said she, hurriedly rolling her pink suitcase out into the hallway and dousing herself. Where is she going when she has a session coming up? Asked Ethan to his wife with surprise. The wife shrugged her shoulders. But folks, how much do you need to explain? A tourist guide's job is like that. I have to pay for the trips, I have to run a little more. I'll buy myself a sports car, and then I'll catch up on my studies. Or should I just leave it now? Will you buy me a car? asked her daughter, putting aside her red stilettos. That's a question for your father. Dad, you explain to your daughter. Her peers are driving the best cars. Only yours is still driving a 5-year-old Porsche Cayenne. The wife turned the tables on her husband again. Ethan couldn't find anything to say but shook his head. Meanwhile, the daughter was already getting into the car of an elderly millionaire who had booked it from the evening and was waiting for her at the entrance. Chapter 2. Kathy, you would at least sneak into the room all day long lying without taking her eyes off the phone, threateningly said the mother to her daughter. But to moms, it would quickly turn into a mess anyway. So what? Look at her shameless mess. She says so the point is to never be a mess. But you're a girl. Mother was indignant. That's right, I am a girl, Kathy said, and stared dreamily out the window. The mother looked at her daughter and noticed something suspicious. Okay, stop. Sit down, she said and sat down on the edge of the bed. Are you in love? She asked. Why is it noticeable? Asked Kathy playfully. Actually, he's so cool at home. Look how cool he is, she said and turned the phone to her mother. Clara saw on the screen pictures of a handsome guy in a brightly colored jacket. She started flipping through the pictures one by one. Here he is in the pool with a cocktail in his hands. Here he is riding over the country town on his flying car. And here he is surrounded by some girls. Kathy, but he's a bit of a slacker, Mother said. And that's because he can afford it. You read his last names, Kathy said, not hiding a blissful smile. Benjamin Chesterton. So what does that make him? Is this the son of the Chesterton everyone's talking about? The mother asked and rounded her eyes. Yes, the son of the most famous Chesterton, and the only heir in the family, and just a handsome guy. And yes, he's not only handsome, he's very vulnerable and touching. He and I have had a couple of private conversations, Kathy said. Didn't you ask him if he wants the daughter of a simple teacher and a simple construction worker? I wish you the best, of course, but you have to be realistic. They're not going to pair these things up in their own circles. The difference with ordinary people. It will be painful for you to realize it later, she said and sighed heavily. Mom, if a woman has a trump card in her hands, it doesn't matter what her background is or what her chosen one wants. I know how to win Benjamin for life, said Kathy, and stretched blissfully again. A spell. That's the kind of thing that can get you in trouble. We've been down that road before. Well, when we were young, of course. Maybe you should just focus on your studies. Are you gonna have a lot of boyfriends? And let's be realistic about what you can do. You're smart, but you're average looking. There's no need for illusions, said Clara. That's what I mean. I'm average looking, but technology is not standing still. This issue is easily solved. Since you've already learned the whole truth, I'll warn you in confidence. If I come home the other day dressed as famous singer neighbor Alba, please don't faint with your father. It's normal now. You go to a clinic, and in a day you're transformed into any star. Then you have all the cards in your hand. You go about your life with confident steps and conquer all heights. And even Benjamin Chesterton, Kathy said. What, are you the one who's going to change your looks or something? Do you know it's not healthy? Asked the mother. All this stuff about body transformations is made up by envious people. They want people to still torture themselves by going to gyms, beauticians, buying cosmetics, and everything else. It's all a huge amount of money and time. There's 1 million people involved in the process. It's their bread. And of course, they don't want to lose all their customers in one day. So they come up with this idea that there's going to be a transformation. It's something terrible. There's nothing really wrong with it, Kathy said. War. I don't like the idea anyway. Father won't be happy about it, that's for sure. And how do we feel? Raised our own girl, and then now that she's different, it'll be hard to adjust. My friend's son already did that. He took on the appearance of some athlete. He immediately lost his temper, abandoned all his interests, only and hangs out with different girls. He's not interested in school or work, said Clara. Mom, you and your father said that study and work are necessary for a person to live well. And if a person has already learned to live well, why all this fuss? It's time for you older generation to learn to look at life in a simpler way, Kathy said. Clara couldn't find anything to object to her daughter. She only reflected on the mores of youth and began to move around in her daughter's room. When her daughter left on the nearest day off ostensibly for her own business, and then returned in the guise of a famous historical singer, the detectives could have. The mother almost fainted. So you weren't kidding? Did you really do it? The mother was horrified. What's wrong? See, now instead of a crooked nose, I have a perfect eye. Look at those eyes. How can you resist them? And those lips. And I can't stop looking in the mirror, said the delighted daughter, looking at her new face in the mirror and admiring it. Why would you do that? You have to get reacquainted with everyone. I don't understand our times, said Clara in bewilderment. That's the whole point. It'll be a surprise for everyone, especially Benjamin. He's a fan of the singer. Does your Benjamin know that it's Ceci Kamal Bey now a little more than his father? She's from our youth. She must be about 80 years old at least. That was made up by her haters. She just turned 23. She said so herself. And the one from your youth is that her historical double, said Kathy. How much does a treat like that cost? Where did you even get the money? Mother finally found it. What's it worth? No more than my lunch at the university. Yes, that's how much Dr. Michael Holliday recently invented this method. The clinic just opened recently. There's a promotion where they give everyone their dream look for a token dream, said Kathy. I still don't like the idea. Don't forget to introduce yourself to your father, or he'll think something, said Clara, still worried about her daughter's dramatic transformation. Chapter 3. The freshmen had already had time to get acquainted with each other and to mark their interest groups. But everyone was surprised by the son of the oligarchs Chesterton. Having such money, why didn't he go to study somewhere in Moscow, for example, or in St. Petersburg? They asked him on the first day. Probably he had done something wrong in front of his father, and they wouldn't let him go anywhere, grinned another student. Cities and distances are not a problem at all. In my case, there are things to do here. I need to be with my father for a while. Help him with his business problems, said Benjamin, briefly, but the bespectacled man's version of the guilt trip to Batya really hit him. It was true. Benjamin was already in trouble with the law, so his parents kept him around until he turned 25, or until he found a good, reliable girl to be his life partner. But Benjamin didn't plan to tie his life to anyone yet, so he remained indifferent to the female members of the group. For several days now, one bright girl didn't like it very much. She is used to the fact that in any place men's eyes are fixed on her, and they first of all try to make conversation with her. And she herself is pretty good at building rapport with them. She decided to make the first move on an attractive object like Benjamin Chesterton. Hi, aren't you bored here? Christina asked Benjamin. Hi, where can I go? Knowledge is power. It's like my dad says, you have to study science. Are you bored here? I'm free after class today. If you want, we can drive around the city or walk over it. What do you say to that? Asked Christina playfully. No, I don't feel like it. I'd rather go to my friends. It's more fun with them, said Benjamin. What kind of friends will you take me with? Asked Christina, not wanting to give up. But since you want so much, maybe I will. They're interesting guys. One of them is a music producer. There are rising stars, athletes, and all, Benjamin said. Christina's eyes lit up. She had long dreamed of reaching a new level in her social circle. Now she decided not to miss this chance. Who is your closest friend that you can tell everything to? Christina asked. I haven't met such a friend yet. Or maybe it will be a friend. I don't know yet, said Benjamin, trying to get rid of the intrusive interlocutor. So you don't have a friend yet? Can I say it's a vacancy? Christina asked playfully. Well, you could say that. I'm waiting for my ideal. You know who I like. The ideal of female beauty, I consider the singer Sosaka Malibu, dreamily said Benjamin. Christina grinned. Why do you need that old lady? She just looks our age. In fact, she's almost 150 years old. My mom used to tell me she was popular in their youth. It's just the Cheese King's success, Christina said. I don't care if she's 370. It doesn't matter. She just has very beautiful and bottomless eyes. When you look into those eyes, you forget about everything in the world. But that's the kind of friend I'd like to have around me. At least I can dream about it. It's not forbidden. Christina was glad that she had managed to get acquainted with her new classmate and to establish at least some connection with him. Now she was eagerly waiting for the lecture to end so she could go with him to his usual circle of friends. Kathy skipped class that day. Instead of university, she headed to the mall in search of clothes. She ran from one boutique to another, trying to find something that more or less fit. The singer's outfits could surprise her lover, then she should do it extravagantly, she decided. Let it be just in time for him to miss her tonight. Maybe he'd still care. And tomorrow she would appear in front of him and his dream come true. At the party among Benjamin's friends, Christina behaved in a relaxed manner. She had watched from childhood how her mother knew how to guess men's whims and train girls to get their way. At home, she would tell her daughter, "You need to become an important specialist and not to have to watch men's hands and depend on their moods. This kind of bread, though it may taste good, is not good for you." Christina strove to live up to her mother's expectations, but some other force led her in a different direction. In her early teens, she was already close enough to fellow students. They had friends who were already working. They were generous, if a girl gives her attention. So Christina was quietly drawn into her mother's line of work, only through another firm. There she was also advised that she could cleverly cipher her occupation, moonlighting as a tourist guide. The mother was pleased that the daughter was taking a different path. The daughter was pleased that she was now independent of her parents and was making decent money on her own. So it was not difficult for her to unravel Benjamin and make him feel at ease. At the same time, she managed to figure out the mood of his inner circle. Everybody's out. Our esteemed friend Benjamin is entering adulthood. He is now a student. And on this occasion, he must be introduced today. Well, Benjamin, we'll order champagne for everyone. One of his friends approached him. No, on the contrary, it is you who should congratulate him and give him a party. I understand Benjamin spoils everyone at every party. Christina answered for him. Before Benjamin becomes an adult, he's already got a collar around his neck. What's next? He's gonna get under his heel, ask his girlfriend for permission. Guys, we're losing our friend, said the friend, and the crowd erupted in laughter. Benjamin did not understand this move of Christina. He looked at her with bewilderment, but he lived and quickly stroked the situation. You can't tame the mice, it's good for them. If someone doesn't like it, he's just jealous of himself, inexperienced in life. Benjamin concluded that Christina is a sophisticated girl ready to stand up for him. From that moment on, he was in awe of her. For the rest of the evening, he did not leave her side. They sweetly and bravely put in place all friends who dared to say something to them. When it was time to go home, Christina asked Benjamin to walk her home. He put her in his flying car, and they drove through the night sky of the sleeping city. Benjamin, you're a magician. I'm so impressed with tonight. I guess I'd like to thank you for that gift, she said. When did you land at the girl's house? Come on, there's no need for anything, Benjamin said, embarrassed. But you didn't even ask what it was about. Maybe you can guess, said Christina playfully. Well, a kiss, I guess, said Benjamin, slightly embarrassed. No, my kisses are not a gift for you, but something to take for granted. You'll see my present one of these days. I probably won't make it the day after tomorrow, but the day after that I definitely will, Christina said, lastly, and reproached from the automobile. Chapter 4. A couple of days later, Benjamin was stunned to see the heroine of his fantasies at the entrance to the building of his university. His feet carried him to meet her. "Girl, I haven't seen you around here before," he said to me, averting his eyes from Kathy and her new appearance. Kathy almost fainted with happiness. "Yeah, I've seen you a couple times before. My name's Kathy, by the way. Shall we get acquainted?" She held out her hand. While Benjamin sang her praises, they went to the auditorium together. When he found out that the girl looks just like his favorite singer and is also his tomb, he was happy. "So you are here. Let's sit together on the last desk. I don't know anything about this higher math," said Benjamin. "I'm all for it, but don't worry. I always got straight A's in algebra for higher math." "Pulled you through," said Kathy. "Finished." The first couple got a call on Benjamin's cell phone. "Benjamin, hi. I promised you a surprise. Well, it's ready. Just come out to the courtyard. I want you to see it first," said Christina in a happy voice. "I'm sorry. I'm just gonna step out for a few minutes. My friend's name is there, by the way, also from our group. Her name is Christina," said Benjamin and hurried to meet her. Kathy felt a pang of jealousy in her heart for the first time, but she didn't realize that this was just the beginning. Meanwhile, Benjamin was stunned to see for the second time today a second girl who looked exactly like his favorite singer in the courtyard of the university. "So that's over the top. How did you manage to transform so much?" asked. "Let that be my little secret. We women have a lot of secrets. You don't need to know about them. Do you even like the way I look now?" Christina asked. "Yes, I like it a lot. But there's one thing. There's another girl from our group who looks just like you. So it's like you're one egg. You're twins, and so it's really cool." "Cool. Yeah, trust me, cool," said Benjamin, showing his approval. Christina was immediately alert. Who dared to beat her? When she came to the audience and saw Kathy, she immediately realized who her main rivals were. The others in the audience were not surprised at the resemblance. Each of them has already heard or even seen how people change their appearance beyond recognition. The beauty industry helps them in this. However, such a quick, effective solution as Michael Holiday was the first time, and few people knew about it. "Listen, girls, you look like sisters. You even have the same height and equipment. How are we going to tell you apart?" surprised one of the girls in the group at recess. "In my opinion, by manners," said a smart guy with glasses named Gleb. "Looks are nothing. But intelligence determines everything," he added, to somehow save himself from Christina's perplexed look. "It's easy to tell us apart. The one next to Benjamin is me, Kathy. And if Benjamin is not around, it will be Christina," said Kathy. The crowd laughed. But Christina could see that she had accepted the challenge and was now ready to fight to the last bullet. Chapter 5. Benjamin, as usual, was relaxing in a nightclub, surrounded by his friends. When he was just approaching the entrance, someone called out to him from behind. Chesterton delayed for a second. A male voice sounded. Benjamin turned around and saw not far from him a guy in a black leather jacket that was a size too big. But it wasn't the jacket that impressed him the most. The very fact of this man's appearance in his life, Benjamin felt a shiver run through his body. "You, William, hi. What are you doing here?" he asked in utter confusion. Rule could barely keep his gaze on his face. Boys, his eyes darted rough scars all over William's face. Such fates. "And you thought I was rotting in a hospital bed. Wrong if I thought that. I found my strength and survived, and now I intend to achieve my own." "By all means," William said. Benjamin's eyes flashed back to the events of 3 years ago. William was his best friend. They had gone to programming school together. William had shown great promise. Even at that time, he was already taking orders from time to time and earning good money. There were never any secrets or disagreements between him and Benjamin. Benjamin, meanwhile, often went with his father to his office, where he gave instructions to his managers. "Everything must have a financial component, otherwise our actions are immoral," he used to say in order to motivate his employees. As a teenager, Benjamin took these words too literally. In addition, the story of his friend William, who was already earning his own money, made him think about his own source of income. "Dad, I want to go into business like you and make a lot of money." "How did you tell your dad? What's the problem?" "I'm very happy that my son is so strongly motivated. All you have to do is find a field, and I'll help in any way I can," his father assured him at the time. Benjamin relied entirely on William in this matter. He conveyed his father's intentions to support their endeavor. William shrugged his shoulders and said that for the time being he intended to support himself as a teenager, and that he would only start thinking about his own business after he had received a higher education. But the idea of having his own income did not give Benjamin any rest when he came up with a plan on his own. It was a software development in the banking sphere, which Benjamin learned about in some other country. William immediately understood the idea and wrote the program. Benjamin started to implement it. He gathered a team and started to earn the first money, until unscrupulous people laid their eyes on their business. William noticed it right away and said, "You should tell your father that we are being persecuted and want to take away our business. If the bandits find out whose son we are, they'll leave us alone. This way they think we're just young guys who decided to take off on our own. So for some reason, I wasn't gonna listen to my friend. Don't worry about it. In business, it's normal to get in trouble. I've seen my father deal with these things all my life. He doesn't complain to anyone, he talks to everyone, and solves everything himself. I have to learn to be independent too," she said. But William doubted whether they could manage on their own. One day a stranger came over, introduced himself as someone's lawyer, charged that their program had violated someone's rights, and billed them for moral damages. William again insisted that Benjamin consult with his father about how to handle the situation. Benjamin again acted cocky. "Don't worry, William, we won't pay them any money. If he comes again, we'll call him in for a one-on-one talk. And then we'll work it out," Benjamin said, and ignored him. A couple weeks later, 3 men came to them. The demands were the same, only this time they demanded a much larger sum than the last time. Benjamin kept his word and arranged a man-to-man talk on the waterfront, where they went with their friends in 2 cars. William was among them. The conversation did not work out. As soon as Benjamin tried to object, 2 unfamiliar adult males called their accomplices, and a group fight ensued. Benjamin immediately figured that his boys could not handle such a powerful attack. He managed to gather his friends into one automobile and drove away. They noticed William's absence among them too late. Only then did one of them call the police to report the fight. Anonymously, a couple days later, Benjamin showed up at the hospital with a wad of cash. "Buddy, you did good, but no hard feelings. You know my dad. He's already warned me twice. If there's trouble with the police again, he won't put me in for a while. He'll put his business in. You get better and try not to make a fuss with the police." Then we took care of it ourselves, Benjamin said and left. William decided to go along with his friend again. He didn't file a police report and explained it to the doctors as a random street scuffle. Only a month later, when he was finally allowed to stand up, William went to the mirror, and when he saw his reflection, he almost fainted. His face was completely covered with lines. The doctor later told him that they were slash wounds. He advised him to have plastic surgery later and get his face cleaned up. But the plastic surgeon turned out to be honest. He said that the face would not become the same. There would still be rough features and a lack of symmetry. After William was discharged from the hospital, he decided never to make eye contact with people again. He had no parents, and his few friends and acquaintances no longer recognized him on the street. They simply expressed sympathy and advised him to look for solutions. This continued until William had exhausted his money supply. And then he decided to start a new life by all means. So he first sent his resume with a photo of himself before the tragic events. He was approved and called in for his interview. But as soon as the girl from the personnel department saw the guy with a disfigured face, she hurried to finish the interview as quickly as possible. Out of politeness, she promised that William would be contacted soon, but no call was made. At the next interview, a girl of William's age was also caught. When it was William's turn and he crossed the threshold of the office, she screamed with fright and was about to call William's security. He had to urgently apologize and removed himself from the office. In the future, he began to send resumes without a photo, but indicated that he had defects in appearance. However, no one responded to his resumes anymore. William guessed why. "Benjamin, I need help. They said my face could be fixed with plastic surgery, but it turns out it's expensive. I came to you as a friend. Maybe you can help me out for now. And then I'll get a job, and I'll be with you," William said. Benjamin avoided this outcome the most. Someone had already informed his father that he was dealing with criminal elements again, and had even been reported to the police. His father was extremely concerned about the matter. He carefully asked Benjamin about the circumstances of the incident, but Benjamin did not reveal anything so as not to lose his father's trust. And if he learned of William's appearance, the old secret risked becoming known to spoil Benjamin's prospects. Benjamin hastily slipped his hands into his pocket and pulled out some bills. "Take this one for now. I don't have any more cash on me. You and I will meet again in the next few days and I will give the required amount," Benjamin said in a hurry. "But you can do something, even without money," said William. "All you have to do is talk to your father and get a reference for me so that I can somehow increase my chances of getting a job. And that's not gonna be easy. I'll tell you my dad doesn't like to vouch for others, but I'll talk to him about it and let you know." "You live at the same old address?" Benjamin asked. "No, mostly at the train stations," answered William. Then Benjamin chose some words to cheer up his old friend and hurried to the club to meet his friends. William realized at once that he could not count on his friend's help, so he walked away with his head down to wander around the city until midnight. With the money, Benjamin William decided to finally grab a bite to eat at a roadside fast food outlet. While he sat and ate on the big screen, an advertisement for Dr. Holliday's clinic was spinning. "Have you long dreamed of becoming a replica of your favorite star? We thought it was expensive. It used to be. But now this problem is solved thanks to the unique solution and scientific developments of Dr. Michael Holliday. Transformation into a different personality is possible in just one day. And such a procedure costs no more than your lunch in the canteen," said the advertisement. Hearing such an unconventional offer, William had a brilliant idea. A couple of days later, he visited Dr. Holliday's clinic. Smith was met by a beautiful girl and immediately changed in her face. "You can't have a young man in here," she said, looking at William's unfashionable clothes and his unshaven face. "Excuse me, but I'm here to see Dr. Holliday." "I really need his help," said William. "I'm sorry, but we have a dress code and face control." "This offer is limited," the girl said, and started pushing him out the door. William tried to explain his situation to the girl, but it was all in vain. The beautiful girl's attacks were joined by a crowd of girls and women who were sitting in line to the doctor and waiting for an appointment to leave his office with completely different faces. And you could already tell by them that he was homeless. Probably drank his face off too. "Young lady, you advertise yourself as a decent clinic, and here you have a homeless man coming in. What kind of disrespect for your customers?" said one of them. "But I have that case where my natural appearance is 5 minutes away from unpleasantness." William tried to explain, but no one was going to take in what he was saying. After a few minutes of arguing, with his head down, William left the clinic. His last hope now lay in Benjamin's conscience, but the latter seemed to forget his promise in a moment, engaging the two beauties of his dreams with his attention. Chapter 6. "Kathy, if I suddenly look at Christina, you know it's my attempt to make sure I'm hugging you. It's easy to confuse the two of you," Benjamin once said, after my relationship with Kathy was solidified. "But be careful, we may look alike, but there's a gulf between us. Their voice is different, Their morals are different. And it's a sport, it's impossible, Kathy said. That's true. I noticed that a long time ago, said Benjamin. But still, for a while you kept playing on two fronts. Kathy smiled a sly smile. I needed that to make the right choice. But Christina disappointed me immediately. She's too risky with my friends, Benjamin said. And I thought you were disappointed in her after the photo of her with an old oligarch in an embrace spread, said Kathy. But that too. Although then she tried to blame it on you. But I determined from those photos that it wasn't you, because you were making me do my higher math homework that day, said Benjamin. By the way, it was your method with higher math that my parents liked too. They would like to meet you sometime as soon as possible, she added. Lissa couldn't believe her ears. She is madly in love with Benjamin and would do anything for him. And not only is she in a relationship with him, but her parents are already interested in her. I'm all for it. I'd love to meet them. I think a guy like you could only be raised by very wise parents, she said excitedly. Well, since you really think so, get ready. I'll try to organize evenings. An acquaintance next weekend, Benjamin promised. Kathy, elated by the upcoming momentous occasion, decided to share her joy with her mother. Mom, I didn't tell you right away, but I have a boyfriend, she said in the evening in the kitchen, helping to prepare dinner. How happy is that? But don't get married yet. You need to finish your studies, get a job, and then get married. Tell your boyfriend that, Mom said. One doesn't interfere with the other. Mom, you have old-fashioned views, said Kathy. I'll look at you when you've got a baby crying all night, and you've got a session coming up, and I need an unprepared look. Husband's not happy. Then what do you have to say about it? One does not prevent the other. We've been there, we know. And argue with Mom, said Clara, not distracted from her piece of text in her hands. Oh, Mom of your youth, that was a lot to take in. But the next generation learned the right lessons from it all. We have different realities. For example, if I marry Benjamin, I don't have to think about all those worries in his family. It's all handled by domestic staff or robots. Yes, they have robots working everywhere, in his father's office, at home, and in the garden, Kathy said dreamily. God, don't remind me about those metal monsters. They've put half the town out of work as it is. I don't want to hear about them. So this Benjamin can afford what? He's the son of a Chesterton oligarch. Everybody knows him. That son is about to take his place. He promised to hand over part of the campaign if Benjamin would wise up and find himself a nice girl, a good girl, and he chose me. He wants me to meet his parents this weekend, Kathy said. You mean the same son of a rich family? I warned you that he might disappoint you, but you're still flying under the radar. People like that don't think of ordinary people as equal. Your Benjamin, of course, can make your head spin for a while, but I'm afraid you'll cry afterwards. It's best not to be under any illusions, Mother said. It's time you changed your mindset to a positive one. I thought you'd be supportive. You'll see, I'll be able to win his parents over, said Kathy, puffing up her cheeks, and went to her room. She was going to do her homework, but Benjamin did not leave her mind. Kathy crammed her homework and went to bed. In the morning, her mother Clara was awakened by her daughter's precise scream. She ran out of the bedroom and headed to her daughter's room. Kathy stood in front of the mirror with her hands covering her face and continued to scream. What's wrong? What's with all the screaming? Asked the mother. Kathy did not take her palms off her face and cried. My face barely spoke, Adriana. What's wrong with your face? Show me. Clara tried to see her daughter's face, but she huddled in a corner and continued to cry. God, what happened? Why don't you explain first? Is something irreparable? Said the mother, and headed for the exit. Yes, I've turned into a homeland. Kathy shouted after her and removed her hands. When she saw her daughter's new face, she was horrified. Smooth skin. Kathy was covered in solid wrinkles. Her face had lost symmetry. Her eyes were barely visible. All in all, Kathy's face could now be characterized as a perfect fruit from the market. Her mother clutched her heart and sat down on the edge of the sofa. I asked you not to experiment on your already beautiful appearance. You're a beauty in your youth. You're still very young. Why did you have to go to all that trouble to transform yourself? My God, what are we going to do now? Where is your doctor who did all this? Dial his number quickly. Dad, he'll take you to him. In the meantime, why don't you tell them you're sick? God, how can you do this? The outrage was read overnight by the mother. Hearing the complaints of the clients of Dr. Holliday's clinic, replied that Kathy could only come up tomorrow. During the course of today, life for Kathy became a total nightmare. She stopped eating and drinking. She was categorically afraid to go to the mirror and see her ugly reflection. She feverishly studied materials on artificial face restoration. The internet gave out stories, one sadder than the other. Meanwhile, reassured by Kathy's absence, Benjamin decided to pick her up after school. He called her when he had already arrived at her house. Alyssa had to lie that she had gone with her mother to her grandmother and would come only in 3 days. She herself then prayed to God that she would be able to restore her face in 3 days, and when she remembered that in the meantime she was living, enjoying her new face and beautifying herself in front of Benjamin, the ground went away from under her feet. The next day came. Kathy was already waiting for Dr. Holliday outside his office in the early morning hours. He took one look at her and didn't even raise an eyebrow. This can happen if you do not take good care of your face. The material is very fragile and can be shaped even by strong emotions. But it's okay. There is a way to restore everything as it was and even make it a little better. But this time the cost will be a little higher because we will try on a different material. Since you didn't save the previous one, said the doctor, do something important faster, Kathy begged. Excuse me, but what will the cost be? Asked the father cautiously to the doctor. Dr. Holliday smiled with a satisfied look and scribbled something on the paper. His mood was generally upbeat these days, as his first clients were already coming back to him and were willing to shell out any money. And now that the doctor had full power over them, he could name any price he wanted. This was his original idea, which no one had realized much about. If he had set an initially high price, like other inventors, no one would have come to him. And for symbolic pennies came a lot of young girls and boys who wanted to become like anyone but themselves. Now these young people make up the entire line that crowds around his office. True, they all cover their faces with masks and other ways to refuse the services of the doctor now. They do not have the opportunity because to eliminate the sharply appeared wrinkle can also only himself, so to speak, the antidote. He also has a unique one. Seeing the prescribed price, Liam sat down on the chair and grasped his heart. Doctor, are you sure your procedure costs that much? Even the rich can't afford it. Well, that's one way of putting it. A man's face is at stake, and a man's face is an indication of his essence. You can go without my procedures, but then you will have to gradually get used to the new reality, said the doctor with a smile, looking at the wrinkles on Kathy's face. This is outrageous. It looks like a fraud. You can't do this. What will happen to my daughter's face? Obviously, she can't go out in public like that now. But this amount of money, it's completely out of our family's reach, the father said indignantly. But no one is rushing you. You can wait until you have saved up the necessary amount. Some people take out loans as an alternative. Well, and if even that does not suit you, then there is only the service of a psychologist, so that your daughter learns to live with her new face. By the way, I can recommend a great therapist. She's in the building next door. Here's her card, the doctor said, and held out his wife Adriana's business card. Kathy and her father left the doctor's office as if they had been dipped in water. If on the way to the doctor's office her father had still reprimanded his daughter for experimenting with her appearance, now he was worried about her. And the doctor's approach caused a wave of anger in him. And at home he was already telling Clara, with great indignation, about the exorbitant cost of the new procedure. It's unthinkable. We wouldn't have that much money, even if we sold the apartment and had to beg, said Clara. What kind of nonsense is that? We won't sell the apartment under any circumstances, resented Liam. Well, what to do with your daughter's face now? Don't you feel sorry for her? How will she show her face in public now? Moreover, she was in a relationship with her boyfriend, the mother said. Let her sit in the corner and think about what to do next. I have no options, the father said, and then went to his room. Kathy sat silently with her hands over her face. Her mother approached her and asked her to show her face again, to see into her daughter's face. She was horrified again. It would only take Holliday to restore Kathy's former beauty. Chapter 7. Dr. Michael Holliday is today enjoying life in the huge house he bought recently. His wife, meanwhile, has returned from shopping satisfied and in a good mood. Adriana, do you think my parents would like our house? He asked thoughtfully. I don't know why you'd ask that. You're not going to bring them to our house, said his wife wearily. What do you mean? Bring it? They're my parents. They are the people who gave me life, upbringing, education, and everything else. In my old age, can't I invite them to my house to live with me for a while? That's not the deal. They're elderly and they need care. And I didn't sign up for that. Elderly people don't do well when they move. They won't like it here, Adriana said. But I have to try to make him like it. You know, my mom's never been happy with me my whole life. Maybe that's why I've gotten results. But there's something childish inside of me that needs to come out. And now that I'm an adult, now that my parents aren't so principled, it's a good time to iron out the inner resentments. We need time together. I think I'll go over there one of these days and ask them to stay with us. And you, my dear, you could do something other than run to the stores and salons. Maybe some sense of values would come into your head. Michael rebuked Adriana. But I need time to figure out what I want to be. Adriana said thoughtfully. Do you have a professional degree? What's the problem? You go and work in a specialty, like me, for example, I answered. Michael, you feel good because your specialty is interesting. You make a difference in people's lives. What's interesting about my specialty? Nothing. I want to work with people, like giving them advice, and I want them to pay me well, Adriana said dreamily. There's only so much trouble out there picking up their patients who don't have the money for a second facial transformation procedure. Teach them to accept their ugly looks. That's where the money will be, Michael said. He thought about it for a moment, and then he burst into rapture. Actually, I've just come up with a brilliant idea. So they come to me for a new face. I do it the first time for symbolic money, and the second time I already put a real bill. And so on up. And not everybody can pay the real bill. Some of them leave. They have to live now with the face of an elderly person. That's how you can gather and do self-esteem training. They really need it, Michael said. I guess this kind of activity works for me. I listened to a lecture by a guru the other day. I can listen to a couple more lectures. The program will be ready. And you, please do not reject those who have no money. Redirect them to me, said Adriana. When finally caught up with the essence of the new family business, she and her husband were happy that now they can use any opportunity for the benefit of the family. Only they couldn't agree on Michael's parents. She told him in no uncertain terms that she wasn't going to have them in her house. But Michael was determined to earn his parents' approval at any cost. He had simply been drawn in that direction for years. Recently, he talked to his friend about it. But he too was puzzled. I don't understand why such aspirations. Michael then tried to explain his position to his friend. You see, many people have such a desire to grow up, to be established, and to build a new adult relationship with their parents, where there is approval, respect, acceptance. I was a bit of a naughty kid growing up. My parents tried in every possible way to guide me to the right path, and their directions were perceived by my childish psyche as violence. That's what's still bothering me today. And if I reorganize it all, I think my worldview will be different, Michael said thoughtfully. Don't worry about it. Michael, let it all go and enjoy life. You can't change your parents for what they were. They'll be like that for the rest of their lives, said the friend. Michael wasn't too upset when even his closest friend didn't get his point. After a while, he talked about it with Ethan, who did not want to participate in the business, but continued to work on their common invention. I see your point. Michael, you are right. It should definitely be done. We are shaped by the totality of our feelings. If a feeling has a place, then it will have to come off of it. Then it has to be related to reality. If you find a relationship with them, then you yourself will have a leap in development. Believe me, I have long been interested in such matters, said Ethan. Ethan, thank you. Once again, I am convinced that you are a unique person. How are you doing? You still haven't thought about joining our cause. It's going pretty well. By the way, Michael said. I know, Michael, but I remembered pretty well. That's not all. You'll see the rest when the time comes, said Ethan. And he continued to work meticulously on his inventions. In the meantime, Michael took a little vacation and came to his parents. They were happy to see their son. Michael talked about his new successes, about the purchase of a new bakehouse, and suggested that his parents move in with him or at least live with them for a while. To which the mother reacted in the usual way. Oh no, you don't. What will happen to my vegetable garden? No, no, no. Who would help me weed the beds, plant cabbage, or remove weeds? She cut it off. But not enough. Well, how many cannot disappear into the vegetable garden? Vegetables are available everywhere now. I need you as moral support. Remember, your entire youth was spent running around. You rarely had the energy to talk to me, like when you were a kid. Maybe you can find such an opportunity now, Michael said. No, don't even ask. I would still think about it, and if you had money, I'd understand teaching my grandchildren. So what's the point of your father and I interfering with your life? The mother insisted. Michael sighed and thought, Mom, I just want to be still your favorite son, like in my deep childhood. And we didn't spend much time with Dad either. Just want to make up for it, said, but all his arguments were in vain. His mother wouldn't go to see him, and his father would only repeat after her. Michael returned to his home in a sad mood. On the way, his head was filled with new ideas about how to increase his capital and how to afford even more goods. What if then his parents wanted to reward him with their attention? Chapter 8. For 3 months now, Kathy has been in a deep depression. The parents couldn't do anything to help. Her mother had barely managed to get a year's deferment on her studies. Otherwise, Kathy is completely bogged down in her life. She walks within the 4 walls of her room. Fox looks at the pictures on her phone over and over again, seeing other people passing away and sinking back into hopeless sadness. After trying several times to call and see each other, Benjamin became frustrated. He did not have time to deal with his relationship in detail. On the other hand, his parents were in a hurry to finally show the beautiful girl who could win their son's heart and influence his views so much. For Christina, the absence of Kathy was a real gift. There were rumors among her friends that Kathy had big problems with her appearance, and she would not soon be able to return to society. Christina decided not to miss this moment. In 3 months, she easily became Benjamin's closest friend, and he was already ready to introduce her to his parents on the day of their meeting. As usual, Christina acted relaxed. Benjamin was proud in front of his parents that he had such a beautiful and interesting companion. Only the Chesterton oligarch was not thrilled with the bride candidate, but he tried not to show it. When the family evening at the restaurant was in full swing, Chesterton stepped out briefly to answer a phone call. No one close to him took any notice. Meanwhile, he managed to catch his sister-in-law in the hallway by the bathroom and grabbed her arm. "What do you think yourself beautiful?" he asked menacingly. "I don't know what you mean." Christina was horrified. "Do not build yourself an innocent sheep. You are the one who accompanies my assistant on his trips abroad, and my closest friend. The restaurateur Klinsky is your regular customer. I remember you well. Maybe you had a little too much to drink." Said, "I'm sorry, you must have me confused with Kathy. She's the one who moonlights on the court. She's the one who's got her eye on Benjamin. And she's been messing with me. Remember, Benjamin was going to introduce me to you 3 months ago, and it was canceled because Kathy had to go away with a regular client." It's just that she also goes to the same transformational coach. She specifically ordered a copy of my look to attract Benjamin. I can barely cope with fighting that girl myself. Christina spouted a pre-prepared cover story. Chesterton did not fully believe the girl's words, but hesitated and let her go. Christina made the right conclusions. She needs to hurry in conquering Benjamin. Otherwise, his parents may interfere with them in the future. How I had no trouble already after 4 months to make Benjamin himself propose marriage and be together for life. The Chesterton oligarch persuaded his son to take his time, to wait a little, but his wife was already under the influence of Christina. In the end, the family played a luxurious wedding. The young were bought a separate house. The father led his 20-year-old son to his business, and the life of all played with new colors, until an unexpected surprise happened. In his life, he was living. Early on a weekend morning, Benjamin hugged his young wife and decided to get plenty of sleep today. And he was living and had plans of his own for today. She was going on a grand shopping spree. She carefully moved Benjamin's arms gently onto the pillow and tiptoed out of the bedroom herself. Not 2 minutes later, Benjamin had to jump out of bed. Hearing a scream from the bathroom, Benjamin came running and saw Christina. She was sitting on the floor with her hands over her face and continued to scream. "What's wrong? Honey, what scared you?" asked. Christina couldn't find the words. She kept screaming and stomping her feet in the bathroom. "Benjamin, get out of here. Don't you need to see this? What's wrong? God damn it, will you at least explain?" I was confused, and my face is burned. I put on a new mask yesterday. I think they tricked me at the store. My skin burned. Screaming Christina. "Oh, come on, don't beat yourself up. We'll go to the doctor. He'll prescribe some medicine and it'll heal. Come on, get ready. I'll drive you." Christina didn't hesitate. She wrapped a scarf around her face. She put on large glasses, let her hair down, and in an hour she was already sitting in Dr. Holliday's office. There was nothing unexpected about this for Michael. In fact, his business had been on the upswing lately. Christina, on the other hand, was serene. "Doctor, didn't you warn me there would be consequences like this? How am I going to explain all this to my husband now? He'd faint if he saw me like this. In fact, any other man would go crazy in fear of my face." "Yes, and began to warn you in the beginning, because our unique material has such a property. It dissolves when a person deceives himself. There must have been some changes in your life. What are you talking about?" "Doctor, this is inhuman. It's cynical and unethical of you. How am I supposed to live with this?" Christina resented it. There are two ways. Either a person removes complaints about his appearance and transfers attention to the inner life. Then after some time, the face itself will recover and become more beautiful than C.C. Kimalbi. Or you have to repeat the procedure, and that will only be enough for a few months. Then one has to repeat it again. If one doesn't want to do the work internally, said the doctor. "I don't want to hear it. About your fairy tales, about the inside. I need you to fix my face right today. Right now," Christina said firmly. "No problem. The cost will be like this," said Michael, and drew some numbers on the paper. The numbers made Christina furious again. The doctor calmly guided her to the only correct solution in this case, again and again repeating his arguments in different words. Michael sometimes wondered himself why he liked to do such cynical things to people, and then to look at their suffering and turn out to be a savior for them again. But big money, impenetrable queues at clinics. Rising popularity took his thoughts in a different direction. He quickly switched from thinking to new dreams, and everything fell into place. When he heard the cost of a Christina facial, even Benjamin was taken aback. "That's nice. Where are we gonna get that kind of money? I could pull some money out of the company's working capital, but that would hurt our future, and my father wouldn't approve. Maybe there's an easier way. What if you really take an internal approach?" "Are you crazy? I'm 20 years old and you're telling me to do something I don't know what to do. I need my old face. Otherwise, I can't be held accountable for my actions. Unwilling to do anything for this goal. Screaming Christina. We are thinking about calling again and asking for a part of the money to restore the artificial face. Neighbors might. This was the first time Benjamin was faced with such a dilemma. After a couple weeks of scandals and resentment, Benjamin found a way to get the money. He decided to pull it out of his father's investment in his company. In the meantime, Christina, wearing the same big glasses and scarf, went to listen to Adriana's lectures. Everyone knew about how to love herself with any appearance. Adriana was happy to have more listeners day by day. Money was flowing into their family again. Chapter 9. A year passed imperceptibly. Christina has long since regained her beautiful face as a famous singer and continues to please Benjamin. Meanwhile, instead of increasing income, Chesterton noticed that his son's capital was melting before his eyes. He had noticed before that his son's expenses were too high, disproportionate to his income. Chesterton's wife was not accepting of Christina from the beginning, and when she found out that with her arrival and the money in the family began to leak, she became furious. "We have to do something to get our son away from this upstart," she said to her husband. He'd been hatching the idea himself. "I agree. I don't like her from the start. I've talked to Benjamin about it many times, but he can't be persuaded. She seems to have opened his head. He doesn't even notice it. He doesn't know about her dark past. She blatantly denies everything," Chesterton said. "Do you remember when he lived? He was friends with some other girl for a while, and then she suddenly disappeared. This one was nice, well-mannered, but somehow Benjamin missed her. Isn't there any other girl in the world but that hysterical girl? Maybe he'll meet someone else. If that Christina gives birth again, there'll be no peace in the house. They usually give birth like that, so they have to do something to get a fortune from the family." Chesterton didn't think twice. He usually has many ways to control reality, both his own and others. "I know how to solve this issue. It's a lot easier than we think with just one phone call," he said, and started going through the numbers on his phone. Meanwhile, back at the Benjamin house, the hysteria is back. Christina went for some kind of wellness treatment yesterday and came back happy. But this morning she's back in front of the mirror and is screaming for Dr. Holliday. Benjamin, hearing her screams, has already guessed what happened. He didn't even bother to argue with Christina this time. It was useless. That day he had taken another large tranche out of the company's turnover, which his deputies had secretly reported to his father. Chesterton only nodded his head and reassured his employees, promising that this outrage would soon be over. He also warned that Benjamin might need help and support during this period, and they took note. So a mysterious girl appeared in Benjamin's life. She was an ordinary girl from the village who came to conquer the big city. But the task turned out to be not so simple. Student life quickly bored her constantly lack of money, stress, and strain. Then she consciously decided to take a different path. She has had a different life ever since. Cindy spends her time around wealthy guys and they pay her generously. Chesterton decided not to remember how his paths crossed with this lovely young lady. He simply called her up and explained the task. One must first steal one nice guy away from one hysterical woman, and then withdraw from his life herself. Cindy didn't bother to be ceremonious. She went straight to Benjamin's office, knocked on his office, and stated that she was looking for a job from secretary or personal assistant. Benjamin at first wanted to refuse since he already had both, but the advance warning and deputies influenced the course of the case. Benjamin has to get rid of the older woman in the secretary's chair and put the young Cindy in it. And further, to translate business relations into friendly relations was not difficult for Cindy. One day, Chesterton came to Benjamin's office unannounced and found them together in the smoking room. He unwittingly witnessed their conversation. You don't appreciate what you have. If your parents advise you to do something, you should think twice before protesting. But I'm old enough to make my own decisions," said Benjamin. "Making a decision is not the most important thing. Everyone makes a decision about everything. Life itself forces us to make decisions every day, even every hour. But the point is how those decisions turn out in the end. Therefore, there is no need to rush. In what is even useful to rely on the opinion of others? We want everything to be our way. Then we get disappointed with everything in life, but we forget about our wrong decisions, Cindy said. Maybe Benjamin is right about something. So it is important to be able to distinguish where our desires are and where the right decisions are. The former and the latter may not always coincide. Parents have been down this road many times, and they may have their own valuable insights. It happens the other way around. When you really want your parents' involvement in decision-making, you don't have them. Like in my case, for example, you want to ask for advice, you want to share your innermost feelings, and you don't have that person. You do, Cindy said. And never like my girlfriends, said Benjamin. What do you do at times like this? Asked Cindy. I just ignore them and choose my girlfriend. Imagine a different reality, where both you and your parents like your girlfriend. You don't have to ignore anyone then, Cindy said. Do I have to ignore all the girls in the world? Asked Benjamin. No, she can be the kind you like, or maybe your parents' taste. Either way, you will know your girlfriend well, and you will clearly understand your parents' thoughts, and you will be the kind of person who knows how to communicate all this to your girlfriend. It's called compromising reality. I realize thinking is not in fashion these days. It's easier to chop from the shoulder, turn away, ignore, insist on your own, and forget about the rest. Cardinal decisions have long been our trump cards, but they create internal conflicts, prevent you from living, and warn you against it, Cindy said. Benjamin did not answer anything. Cindy talked for a long time about how Benjamin had been lucky with his fate, that he should appreciate his opportunities, that he should think about education, about gaining life experience. But the thing that surprised Chesterton the most was her final sentences. When you pass all the tests of maturity, it won't matter to others what kind of girl you're dating or what kind of relationship you have, because everyone around you will trust you. You will then have no one, not even your parents, interfering with your life. They will know that even if you make a mistake, you are able to deal with the consequences on your own, she said. Chesterton nodded his head in surprise and walked on. His experiment seemed to have succeeded. Chapter 10. Do you even know who you're dealing with? Shouted Christina, bursting into the police chief's office. Lady, you can't come in here. All matters are handled by the investigator on duty. Tried to explain, but he managed with shouting and hysterics to get the police officers to deal with Dr. Holliday's activities. Christina went home with a sense of satisfaction. She had hoped that the police would nail the doctor properly, and he would finally agree to give her another beauty restoration procedure for free. Or for a less affordable amount, not for the cost of 2 towers. But a couple days later, she gets a call. It's the police. You complained about the activities of Holliday the scientist. We checked him out, the cop said. How'd it turn out? He's revised his client policy, Christina said. It's an internal matter for his clinic. But we did a legal assessment of his activities. In short, he has not violated any laws of our country. Therefore, we have no grounds to punish him, the police officer said. How is it no grounds when he earns 1 quadrillion by fraudulent means, without warning clients about the risks? The fact is that people go to him by their own decision. No one is forcing them. The doctor hangs on the wall of his clinic that the artificial face will not last long, that it will reform even from wrong thoughts. And then the client himself is responsible for the exploitation of his face. Citizen, don't distract us from our work. Goodbye, said the policeman, and hung up. Christina got even more angry. She decided to go the usual way. According to the U.S., I can't get a deal with the doctor. We'll have to pay him again. You won't refuse me, she said in a sad voice. I don't want to discuss the matter now. I'm sorry, Christina. I'll be home late. I have to take care of business and catch up on my studies. Benjamin answered briefly and hung up the phone. Christina had not yet realized that it was their story that had come to an end. Chapter 11 Road, almost a year and a half in confinement and depression, had not gone to waste for Kathy. She had learned to live a little differently. On days of listlessness and sadness, she reached into her parents' bookshelf for the first time to distract herself somehow. In one book, she found a heroine with a similar fate, and in another she found a stubborn man who would not give up under any circumstances, and eventually succeeded. With each new book she read, she had a drop of hope that she would someday be able to give herself and go out in life. With each new book she read, she had a sliver of hope that she would someday be able to conjure herself up and face life. On this day, she was inspired by yet another story of a hapless hero's triumph. What the hell? Maybe someone will be interested in my story, she thought, and started writing a letter to the publisher with the title of her story. She didn't bother much. She liked to call things by their proper names. Such was the case with the title of the book, How I Lost My Love to a Girl of Easy Behavior. Kathy in the book described her love for Benjamin, her struggle to win his heart, her attempts to please his fantasies, and of course, her typical failure with the loss of her artificial and then natural beauty. To demonstrate even more vividly, he attached his before and after photos. After sending the letter, she quickly switched to another clinic, and the letter was already forgotten the next day. A month or more later, her mother brought her a letter in an envelope, and in addition to the letter, there was a decent amount of money. It was not so much money that she could get her face back, but it was substantial enough. In the letter, she is approached by a representative of a publishing house. He writes that her book has aroused great interest among readers, and they intend to repeat the circulation. He also unobtrusively asks to respond to emails Kathy writes to readers in order to stimulate book sales. Kathy couldn't believe her eyes at first. Then she opened her email account and was blown away by the number of emails and responses. Complete strangers were writing to her with words of encouragement, admiring her courage, giving her helpful advice, and wanting to get to know her better. Among these letters was even an offer to be the heroine of a TV program. Kathy accepted the offer without a second thought. No, not to complain about her fate and her failures, but to share her impressions from her experiments, as well as to warn others about how deceitful people can be in the field of fulfillment of our wishes. Shortly after the telecast with Kathy following Dr. Holliday, again the uniformed men came, but the man knew his risks, so he did not talk to them. His lawyer Cyril spoke to the law for him. Chapter 12. Dr. Holliday and his wife Adriana today decided to celebrate the successful closing of the criminal case on his activities. The domestic staff had prepared sumptuous tables for them and then vacated the house. She was irresistible in her gorgeous couture gown. Michael was also happy, but the feeling of missing something important kept him in suspense. He decided to talk to his wife about it once again. Maybe I can finally convince my parents to come live with us. They won't cause you any trouble, but their presence is very important to me. What do you want to do? I'm planning to work in the islands for the winter. All my clients are in favor of it. We will grow and develop on the ocean, said Adriana dreamily. I've talked to them many times about it. They don't agree. They are well aware that you don't like them, so they don't want to, said Michael. Well, you're weird. They're your parents. You don't have to love them. You don't have to love them, said Adriana. But this is our house. You're the owner of this house. You're my soulmate. You should at least have the courtesy to talk to them once in a while. Oh, Michael, let's not get all sentimental. I've got my own things to do. And you're the Georgian with your parents. Let's not get negative. I want to raise a glass to our successes with you, she said. Michael did not pursue the topic of parents further. That evening they drank wine, celebrated their successes, and made far-reaching financial plans. Toward morning, Michael had a dream in which a huge black swan was sitting on the roof of his house. The swan's wingspan is capable of throwing a man off his path. Michael sees himself from the outside, as if he were a little boy. He is scared and seeks shelter, but cannot find a place to hide. Suddenly, he sees his parents moving away from him holding hands. He runs after them, but it's as if they don't hear him. The black swan now begins to chase him. Michael stops breathing out of fear. The whole surrounding space floats in his eyes. He tries to scream and call for help, but his voice fades into his chest. Michael opens his eyes to what little broken window of his house. Before he could realize what was happening, two men in special clothing grabbed him and carried him towards the exit. Others came in next and carried Adriana out. The street was crowded. Neighbors had long ago gathered around the house and looked in horror at the flames that completely engulfed the first floor of the huge house. They were giving first aid to the ambulance. She managed to inhale smoke and lost consciousness. Michael was on the verge of passing out, but the firefighters managed to put out the fire in time. Everyone moved away. The owners of the house were not badly injured. Michael lay sat in their garden, where the barely visible signs of landscaping remained, and looked sadly at the remains of their home. Chapter 13. Kathy decided to go out for the first time today, despite her fate and unattractive face. The main thing is not to pay attention to anyone and not to stay there long. If you feel that things are going wrong, come home quickly, my mother advised. No matter what happens, I will try to spend 2 o'clock among people, even if they laugh at me or say something insulting in my wake. It won't affect my mood, she said, and proudly rocked into reality. No sooner had she reached the nearest park than a woman's voice called out to her, "How do you know my name?" The older woman, her face completely covered in wrinkles, smiled at her life from the classroom. I know a little more than you might think. I've lived my life. Look at my wrinkles. Each one has a story," the older woman said. "I just wanted to tell you that you really are what's beautiful. You have your whole life ahead of you. Live and do good, and the rest will come," the old woman said to me, and went on with her warm smile. Then Kathy came to the park and took a seat on a bench. 2 lovers were already sitting there. The girl turned to Kathy and also suddenly said, "Hi. I'm glad you decided to go outside. Believe me, the world is not as cruel as we sometimes think it is. And the world also reflects our inner world. You wrote a wonderful book. I found a lot of similarities with you in it for myself, continuing to create and knowing that you are a wonderful person. Thank you. Did you read my book? Who hasn't? In this day and age, when everyone is obsessed with being anything but themselves, books like this are very interesting." At this, Kathy's mood rose to the heavens, and it seemed as if wings grew behind his back. But the world was not going to stop its surprises. On the way home, an older man spoke to her, complimenting her and wishing her creative success. There was a young woman in a business suit who treated her to a chocolate bar and praised her book. There was a young, handsome guy who admired her performance on a TV program. I her courage. But not everything was going so well in Christina's life. Lately, Benjamin had changed completely. He would stay late at his office, and when he came in, he would go straight to bed. No entertainment. Christina decided to talk to him about it. "Benjamin, it's not going to work that way. You and I are still very young. We're spending these beautiful years wondering what you're going to do with your job. I've been held hostage to this whole transformation. I feel miserable. We need to have a serious talk about this," she said. Benjamin sat down opposite her and took her hand. "Are you right? We're young, and we don't know what we're wasting our lives on, especially me. But I'm getting smart now. I want to become a worthy representative of my family. If you think the same, you should stop your experiments with your looks and start studying too." "Those are the rules now," Benjamin said. "What other rules are you going to dictate to me now? How I should live my life? Who gives a shit about school? There are 1 million opportunities in the world to make a life for yourself without all this pointless fuss. You're being badly influenced by your environment. All your father's appointees in the form of your deputies want to turn you into a boring office monster. Come to your senses, fire everyone, and let's go back to our normal lives. We had such a good time. Remember," she pleaded. "That time has passed. There must be a measure for everything." "I'm not going to backtrack," said Benjamin. "How do you want it? Won't you give me money for a new procedure? Or I'll just sit in four walls with an ugly face. How long do I have to listen to the lectures of this know-it-all to learn how to look people in the eye with such a face? Christina is hysterical again. Christina, you don't need someone else's face. You were beautiful on your own. Just try to get your looks back, and everyone will be happy. That's not possible anymore either. But then you have to build up your inner beauty. I've heard that many people who are dissatisfied with their looks have worked on their inner world and soared through life on that. Try it. It might help, the guy said. No, you gotta be kidding me. I can't take it anymore. I'm leaving you, said Christina, and started packing her things. When she had packed 4 full suitcases, Christina's ability to think returned, and she sat down to think. But there were no useful thoughts in her head. Then she dialed up her mountain, which had been borrowing their money for the last few months, helping to build sandcastles in her head. Adriana, honey, save me. My young man is kicking me out of his apartment. He says he doesn't care what I look like. What am I supposed to do? Christina, I'm sorry, darling, but right now, I have that question hanging over my head. My house burned down. My husband and I live in the backyard, and every day we ask ourselves, what do we do? Do you happen to know what we should do? Answered them. I know everything, Kina. And even so. Well, sorry, I called another day. You hang in there, said Christina, and hung up. A few minutes later, a cab was waiting for her to her house. On the way home, Christina was still angry and convinced herself that one bad story with one oligarch's son was not the end. There are plenty of rich people out there with her experience and her fighting attitude. She has no intention of staying on the sidelines of life. Holiday's doctors, meanwhile, are looking for hundreds of clients, and now the phone is bursting with calls, and he doesn't answer any of them. Instead of dealing with the problems with his house and the influx of new clients, he went to his old address, where he had started coming less and less often lately. The wooden wicket opened with a creak. An old woman, going through the fruit in the yard, threw her bucket on the ground and ran towards the guest. Son, how long have you been away? We missed you, Michael's mother said, hugging him. I have missed you very much too. How is Dad? Where is he? He asked his mother. Dad is in front of the TV as always. He will be very happy to see you. Then they sat down at the big family table. My favorite berry pie. Michael decided this evening to hide in front of his parents. Mom, Dad, I had toiled and studied and worked and researched and experimented for so many years, and it seemed like I had succeeded. But recently there were events that, after which I began to doubt my path. I would like to ask your opinion. What am I doing wrong? Why is there something inside of me that is constantly rasping and does not let me relax, said. But it's a normal state. Man, you have big demands on the world. That's what pushes you forward. But no, it's a normal condition for a man. You have great demands on the world. That's what pushes you forward, Father said. No, Father, you're wrong. This time is different for my son. That's something we should have talked about at some point. I'm glad he's ripe for it. Father didn't stay at the table long. He ate and went back to watching his TV. But Michael and his mother talked for a long time. Son, you've really accomplished a lot. I am proud of you, the mother said when they had talked about everything. Michael felt like that little boy again, who made himself study hard day after day, to be diligent, to be interested in science, and then in time to open a clinic, to make a lot of money. As a smart man, he realized that everything is done in order to hear these words. That day came. That night, Michael slept in a completely different dream than before. He had dreamed some fabulously beautiful dreams and fantastic pictures. When he woke up in the morning, he told himself that life had been a success. He was in no hurry to leave his parents. From that day on, he started talking to his clients differently. He honestly warned them that they would not be able to wear someone else's face for a long time. He also raised the cost for the first treatment and honestly told them that they would have to repeat it many times. A week later, Adriana called. Michael, don't you think you've been on too much vacation? Your clients are tearing down all the doors. Don't we need the money now? Actually, we're living in a rented apartment ourselves, in case you've forgotten. Said all the signs are on. I've assigned the clients to my assistant. Half of them will refuse our procedure when they find out the truth. I'm already telling them that you don't have to strive to become a different person. You have to protect your identity. I don't get it. What are you brainwashed by the village? You're saying they're screwing up our achievement with their own hands. No, I just decided that I don't need to run anywhere now. I should have come to this sooner, but I kept listening to your wishes. And I've been putting off heart-to-heart talks with my parents for an unknown period of time, said Michael. It makes sense. Your mother always disliked me, so she found a way to bring discord between us. You let her do it, Adriana said, not hiding her anger. Mom had nothing to do with it. She's always been good to you. By the way, I want to take them with me for the winter. I really need them, Michael said. Well, how do you want it? Just let me know in advance before you leave. I want to buy a ticket to the Canaries. I'll be there all winter. And afterwards we'll discuss how to live our lives, said Adriana, and hung up the phone. Chapter 14. Kathy came home in high spirits. Clara saw that her daughter was finally smiling for the first time, no matter how ugly her face looked, but when she smiled she became more attractive. Mom, you have no idea. It turns out that there are so many good and deep people in the world, she said, not hiding her delight. Well, and you wanted to live the rest of your life in four walls. How did you come to that conclusion? They came to me and told me everything. I've seen older people who have more wrinkles on their faces than I do, and yet they smile and compliment me. They thanked me for being able to express what is in their hearts. So it turns out that somewhere deep down we are similar to each other, but different only in appearance. How amazing is the world, Kathy told me. All evening, the parents. Then the family went to sleep in their rooms. And in the morning, Clara was awakened again by a precise scream from Kathy's room. She didn't startle much this time. How was it then? Father, what could it be again? Why don't you go and have a look? Did she nudge her husband in the side? No. If I do, I won't have the words to comfort her. I'd rather do it myself. Maybe she's just playing a trick on us, said Liam, and turned on the other side to go back to sleep. She tiptoed to her daughter's room, where the screams and shrieks were still coming from. She cautiously opened the door, and when Kathy saw her mother, she broke out with renewed vigor with a scream that almost muffled her. Mother, look, the face restored to my own face, which looks so much like you and Father, which has always been with me since I was a child. Look how beautiful, how smooth. Oh, my eyes, they glow. I see fire in them, screamed Kathy, bouncing to the ceiling. At what a price, said Clara through a smile. But now he's walking around happy with himself. And again, you go to become like some singer or actress, asked the father, who had lost peace from his daughter's screams and even managed to reach the door. No, no. And again, no. I am perfectly fine on my own, said Kathy, and jumped up to the ceiling again. So the downstairs neighbors started banging on the radiators. Chapter 15. Cindy caught Benjamin late in the evening in his office. When she walked in, he quickly closed the book and put it aside. What are you reading? Nothing. Just some popular literature. I saw this book. There a girl writes her story of her outer appearance, then inner transformation. I'm impressed. I didn't even know you read books. Well, I can't be the cats of the rich forever, she thought. But she didn't say it out loud. Yeah, sometimes I browse the hits, she said instead. Anyway, I just came to say goodbye. What's wrong? You don't like working with me? No, it's fine. Actually, from your father's company, we had a contract for a year. It's expiring and I decided not to renew it. But what about our friendship? Let's be honest. We both know this relationship is going nowhere, but it will be part of the experience. I have no beef with you. I don't think you do either, So best of luck to you and new heights. Glad to sit at the same table and chat sometime, Cindy said, heading for the exit. Wait a minute. Remember when you said to appreciate what you have? Is that still true? Asked. It's relevant for eternity, said Cindy, and closed the door behind her. Then she headed straight for Chesterton's office. He was already waiting for her. He placed the envelope on the desk and said, I've been watching you influence my son. I think you're doing the wrong thing, and you're in the wrong place. Chesterton said, to be honest with you, and in talking to your son, I've come to that opinion as well. But it's not evening yet. I've been thinking. I'll continue my studies. I found a job too, just like Benjamin taught me. There was a lot of insider knowledge, Cindy said. You've done the right thing. If you need help, don't run off the beaten path. If you need help, don't run down a crooked path. Come to us. We'll try to find a case that we'll also pay for if possible, Chesterton said. Cindy, with a light sadness in her heart, headed to the training facilities to make some payment and sleep well for her future. Chapter 16. Michael talked to each client at length and sent many back so they wouldn't ruin their looks for nothing. And when he saw the guy with the prize on his face, he realized that today he was going to have a difficult but interesting task. William took a seat in the chair. How did this happen? Michael asked. There was a fight. Cut to the bone. But the scaring won't go away, said William. Why did you get it so bad? Asked Michael. I was saving money, and at the time I didn't have any. How much did you save? But I think it's enough. Let's make a deal so you spend the money on your life, and I'll fix your face, and I'll make sure there are no consequences. You can boldly start a new life and love yourself again, said Michael. Thank you so much. But what's changed? You used to charge a lot of money, asked William. Something inside me has changed. I was sure that a lot of money would make me a big man in the eyes of society, but I thought I was small. But one day I sat down with my parents and told them all my worries. Then they said they were proud of me. These words turned me into a big man on the inside. Now I have no need to hoard wealth. Now I do it from the perspective of my own mission. Now I heal destinies and try to bring people back to life, Michael said. And he was right about that. A couple of days later, William stood in front of the mirror and did not hide his delight. Doctor, I think I look like a Hollywood star, he said, smiling. You are a star, but you don't have to be a Hollywood star. Everyone has the right to be the star of his life, but without fanaticism, the doctor said. 2 months passed, and another patient seemed very familiar to Michael. You've probably already forgotten me, but I haven't forgotten you, said a young, handsome guy in a business suit. Face looks very familiar. I guess we've done business before, huh? The doctor winked. Yes, we have. My gratitude to you is boundless. You didn't take money from me then, but I couldn't leave such a contribution to my life without gratitude. Please accept it, William said from the bottom of his heart and put the thick envelope on the table. But since it's from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you suddenly get wrinkles on your face, don't be afraid. They just appear on the face when the unnecessary things accumulate in the soul, Michael said. The guest did not stay long. Briefly told that he was doing well. Having finished his business, Michael hurried home, where his father and mother are waiting for him. Adriana has all the signs, is also doing well. She had recently called from the canals and said she had met an up-and-coming doctor. Michael did not take offense to her. After all, life is interesting with changes and inner discoveries. This was a phrase from Kathy V.O. Sutkin's book, which people had plundered for quotes, and Kathy herself had started writing a new book. But as soon as she wrote the first page, her mom announced that someone was calling her. Kathy was surprised, for she had no friends left for a long time, and she had not made any new ones yet. She opened the door and saw a long-forgotten face in front of her. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I made you make such a sacrifice, but I understand now, said the long-forgotten face up high. Why aren't you at school? Kathy asked playfully. But probably because I would have liked to go there with you. replied the taller one. And so it happened. They graduated together, each developed in his own direction. True, the adventures in their lives did not end there. But that is another story.